All right, guys. Hello, 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 and welcome to the stream. Those, can, how do I say your name, Alan? Kamal, Alan, Kamalin. The graphics that you guys saw in the opening are from Cam Allen. Thank you. And definitely go follow him on Twitter. His Twitter is
Oh
at,
yeah.
thank you, Horizontal, for the follow. I might have turned off the sound notifications for that because it's very loud. But his Twitter is down in the corner. It says Cam Allen. Definitely worth a follow. He has way more stats than what you guys are looking at right now. Or Horizontal made the graphics, sorry. They're amazing, Molly. Good call out. They're freaking awesome. Uh, Rich, Liv, and Mike, thanks for the follow. Hino, thanks for the follow. All of you guys that have followed, appreciate you guys that followed before the stream even started. So I have a guest today, and as you can see, he's frozen on the screen because you guys are just going to hear his voice. Um,
It's a great picture,
and
by the way.
it is. I mean, I had to like, I had to pause your video and catch you right in it.
All good.
So what's up, Pat? By the way, I see you in the chat. So, what we're gonna do today is this is gonna be very laid back. This is not the sticks for those of you that used to watch my show. We're not doing like an official like podcast. Goalie is not hosting it. I tried to get him to, but he had to travel back home from Minnesota, and so he couldn't until tomorrow. But I can't do it tomorrow because I gotta work. So. Um, but we're going to show some more of those graphics. We're going to talk about the standings. We're going to talk about our favorite moments, the players. We're going to talk about specific matches, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking to you guys in the chat. So, um, whenever you want to start talking, if you have something to say, just say it, and we'll try to go back and forth and get in the mix when we can. But I'm going to start by introducing myself. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Kingdom Soldier, and I've been playing Call of Duty, watching Call of Duty for probably 10 years. I've been a Call of Duty fan for a very long time. I tried to play COD 4 and I sucked at it, so I went back to Halo. And then I think it was like Modern Warfare 2 that I actually started grinding really hard on. Like, I just love that game. And then Black Ops 1, I played a lot. Black Ops 2, of course. That was where I started making YouTube videos, and then at the end of Black Ops 2, or somewhere in the end of Black Ops 2, or in the middle, I took a break and I came back and I became an esports commentator. It's really weird. I'm not going to tell the whole story. It's in plenty of my videos. Um, and yeah, I've been an esports, Call of Duty esports fan ever since. And franchising is here, and I'm excited. We had an amazing weekend, lots of people watching. I think way more than some people thought. Um, yes, Modern Warfare 2 is great. I love it. Input with Atlanta not facing Chicago 8 of the 12 tournaments. Ooh, I didn't even know that, bro. I'm gonna have to look into that. Like, that's actually a good question that we're gonna get into later. I didn't know that they weren't facing each other at 8 of the 12 tournaments. That's crazy. Um, it's gonna be a big deal when they do face each other, I guess. So anyway, you guys can see all my links down below for subscribing and checking out my YouTube and my Twitter. Donating, all that kind of stuff is below the stream. But I'm gonna let Icon introduce himself and tell us what you want us to call you, Icon, because um, you have different names in in the different locations that where you're at, and if Icon is the best way to call you out, then that's what I'll call you for the rest of the show. But if you just want to introduce yourself, tell us how long you've been how long you've been doing whatever you're doing in Call of Duty, what you do on your YouTube channel, which I think is freaking amazing. Which is you guys can see above his
Oh
picture.
yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so
Go ahead.
icon's fine.
Okay.
That's perfectly fine. I don't know. So on my YouTube channel, I really just I break down the strategy behind the games. So I'm not really doing too much like news or anything like that. I'll take a game and I'll break it down and I'll try to tell people why whatever's happening is happening. So like as it's about to rotate hard points or as there's something happening in domination, like I'll try to slow it down, I'll draw it up so that people can understand because like we talked about earlier, so we talked a little bit before this, but sometimes this game, especially with the switch to 5 and how fast people are dying, things just happen so quickly in this game that sometimes it's hard to see what exactly is happening. So I'll just take those. I'll break it down so that I don't know, so people can be more informed on kind of what's happening on a game to game basis. But I started playing back in Call of Duty 4. That was my first one, and I just played it religiously. After that, I did play quite a bit competitively. I attended some events. I never placed like top 10 or anything, but
Wait, slow down. What games did you attend events in?
so for events, I attended an AW, actually, Advanced Warfare. And I live in Ohio, so we went to the ones that we did attend. We went to MLG Columbus, played in the
Awesome.
open bracket, won a couple games, lost a couple. It was more or less a thing like kind of just for fun. But yeah, it was cool to be a part of the scene even back then when it was still growing a little bit.
Yeah, that was a great game.
It was. I think it was underrated, but I
Well,
don't know.
now
The new ones are
everybody
better.
appreciates it. Everybody's looking back at AW like, man, that was a good year. Like that was the game. That was besides Black Ops 2, which I had Kingdom 8s and I would invite people into my stream and we would play 8s for hours and hours and hours. Besides Black Ops 2, AW was another game where I kind of grinded it, and played. And that was when I played my first GB, was on AW.
Nice. Yeah, Black Ops 2, you can't beat Black Ops 2. Even though it had its issues, that's everybody's tops for sure.
It was just so like when we talk about things like competitive integrity, which is a big deal right now, Aches is talking about that a lot. Black Ops
Mhm.
2 was just a great all around game. It was very competitive, and it brought because of Nade Shot, Scump, and everybody, all the personalities blew up in Black Ops 2, Optic House, all this kind of stuff. Like Black Ops 2 did for our esport what I don't think any game since then has done.
Yeah, well, the other thing with and so that game, it's a lot if you're thinking about like just the strategy of that game. It's kind of a lot like MW in that. So Black Ops 4 I enjoyed, but I just hate how like for me personally, I'm not a big fan of the specialists and all that, just because it just seems like
Mm.
okay, now you didn't do anything really to earn the specialist, so it was always just like okay, here's your specialist, now it's your turn to go change the map when like it wasn't really like earned that much.
Yeah.
I just like the strategy of these games a little bit better where it's real strategic and you have to work your way around the map and I don't know, just how I
No,
feel.
I feel it. I agree with you. It is this game, in my opinion, is kind of back towards like its traditional boots, but the 5-on-5 definitely changes the game. So I guess let's start getting into the event that we just had this weekend.
Yeah.
And so what I'd like us to do is kind of start with an overall grade and maybe why you would give it that grade. And I'm gonna actually let you go first, and you can just go A through F. I know you're not gonna give it an F, but just talk about kind of what you were hoping to see and what you saw, and why you would grade it the way you would grade it.
Yeah, so man, there's so many. I feel like we could do an hour long show just on the event itself. But I don't if I'm giving it a grade, I'd probably give it, I don't know, somewhere in like that B minus range, B range, somewhere in there. I
Okay.
feel like I don't know. I feel like, and just in terms of the presentation,
Oh
it usually went
yeah.
pretty seamless. Like from the booth to the casters to the match. Every once in a while, they had to restart something, but I feel like for the very first time with a whole brand new production and a new team and everything, I thought it was pretty decent. There were a couple things that I didn't like. Like sometimes, like the player intros, sometimes those were a little weird. Like having them walk down the aisles and whatnot. Whereas, so like one day they would
Mm.
walk down the aisles, the next day they were appearing from behind the
Up in
screen.
the
The
yeah.
next day, they were standing in front of their stations. So like I don't know. I get that it's the very first one and they're trying to like figure out kind of what to do there, what's going
Right.
on. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I thought overall I was interested to see how it would flow with it being the very first time that, a new team, MLG is not doing it anymore. So like everything was basically built from the ground up. And I think the venue was great too. The Armory in Minnesota,
It was
they
awesome.
did a nice job with the graphics and the screens and I don't know. Overall, of course, there were some things that probably could have been better, but for the most part, I mean, the only other thing that I'll say is that on Saturday, everything was delayed like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like Call of Duty's known for that, right? That's like kind
Yeah.
of who they are. Everything's just usually kind of delayed a little bit.
Right.
So maybe that could have been fixed, but I mean, we got an extra in the end, an extra 2 hours of Call of Duty that day or something. So I don't know. I'm not going to complain about it too much.
Okay, so I have to ask because of what you do. And again,
Yeah.
I want to shout to Icon, his YouTube channel, where he breaks down games. He breaks down scrims. He broke down, I think you uploaded like 10 of the matches already.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably 10,
I think it
somewhere in
was
there.
close to 10. I was counting today. I was watching a couple of them. Just really breaking down the map live and what the players are doing and what they should be doing. And especially if you're a competitive player. If I was like even an AM team, I would watch it. But um, give me your thoughts on the broadcast as far as the gameplay goes and you're as someone who's trying to study what's happening on the screen, like what that was like for you.
All right. So so the broadcast presentation. I know. So first thing, again, this was all brand new. So I do
Right.
think there were so many different toys that they had to play with, and they were trying to do so many different things. But I do feel that from the beginning of the weekend to the end of the weekend, it got better. It got a little bit, more seamless. Things were able to be seen and whatnot. But if you really wanted to get down to the nitty gritty, there were a ton of things that they could have fixed. So, first of all, just the nature of this game, and we talked about this a little bit,
Yeah.
just the nature of the game by itself 5v5, the time to kill is so fast. And sometimes they're third person, sometimes they're looking at static cams. There's so much happening that sometimes it's hard to even follow what's going on. In fact, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Overwatch, and I don't want to
Hmm.
go like down on that tangent, but like
Really?
if you're watching an Overwatch game and you've never seen Overwatch before, you tune into an Overwatch match and you have no idea what's happening anywhere. There's just so much stuff everywhere, you don't know really what's going on. And a little bit, that's
Yeah.
kind of how this reminded me. Um, but I mean, if we're getting down into the specifics, so in the mini map, so a lot of what I do, I can tell what's happening throughout
Oh
the match by looking at the mini
yeah.
map.
Right.
So who's flanking, who's taking over spawns, where different teams are, stuff like that. So as I'm watching the mini map, if there was a team that was a light color, it was super easy to see their arrows.
Yep.
But if there was a team that was a dark color, you really can't tell.
You
So
yeah,
I'm
you
trying, yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on in these matches, and I can really only see one team. And then with the static cams, so when the when the mini map goes away, now they're looking at a static cam, and I can't see flank routes. I can only see what's going on in the hill. So to try to break down those games, it just gets a little bit difficult, just because there's just so much stuff that you can't really pick up on.
right. I man. So as an observer, and I'll just say like what I heard is that the reason they went with third person in the beginning, because, and I won't say a name, I don't want to say a lot of names during certain parts of this show, but there was a personality that was on Twitter that was kind of going at the community for having the perspective they
Oh
have. Like they were
yeah.
almost being very argumentative about having an opinion that it was hard to watch in third person hardpoint. But and then their reasons were they want to appeal to a broader audience and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, but if I was a complete noob to Call of Duty, I would have no idea what was going on in that first match. Like and we're talking about like you're introducing it to the world. And this is where I think we could do a better job of this every year. Like I'll say again, I got a DM from someone that was on air talent telling me, "Thank you for being public about your opinion. It was not us, it was not the observing team. There's people that just thought they knew better." And I mean, Maven said that publicly. He just was like, people thought they knew better than we did. And I remember listening to Maven on the Spitfire
Oh
podcast. Thank you guys for all the
yeah.
follows. I'll call you guys out in a second. But I remember Maven saying on the Spitfire podcast that we were going to have the best broadcast experience that we've ever had in history. The tools that they had were going to be things that we've never seen. And I'm getting excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. And then I sit there and I'm like,
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's there. Like, all the tools are there. They just have to figure out when to use them and how to use them.
facts. That, like, right, man, I wish I could just quote that and tweet it. All the tools are there. They just need to figure out how to use them and when to use them. And yeah, Maven keeps going out and saying it's like he's the spokesman for the production team or something. Um, because other people didn't want to be so vocal about the fact that they didn't like it, you know? Um, but people, you can't blame Paradox. You can't blame anyone, because what I guarantee happened is they said they had a meeting and they said, no, you will use third person in Hardpoint, period, because
Yeah,
we're
it's
trying to
possible.
appeal to a
Yeah.
broader audience. I mean, it was not,
Oh
you know, Paradox and Maven and
yeah.
Benson are sitting there like, oh my gosh, we just have to use third person, guys. It's looks so much better. And that's where I think maybe have a private LAN scrim where you actually broadcast it for a small audience and let them give feedback, because this happens every single year. Two things happen every year. We do a patch right before the first event that is within a week of the event. And then the second thing is there's things on the broadcast that we're like, why did you do that? And then you hear from casters, well, we told them, they didn't listen. And it's like at some point, the millions of dollar people way up at the top have to kind of go, you know what, let's listen. And you know what? I mean, I applaud them for listening to the tournament play style and all that kind of stuff. So good grade, B minus. My
One thing,
grade, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
one thing I'll say just real quick on the specifics of the broadcast is that, like we were talking about with how all of this stuff is there, like if you were just watching, from somebody's POV, like say you're watching from Formal's POV,
Right,
there's a mini map in the bottom left-hand corner. Perfect. You can watch and you can follow along. As soon as they went to third person or a static cam, that mini map goes away. Now you
yeah,
can't see what's happening with rotations or anything. And just to build on top of that, the pictures that were up in the top right hand corner, sometimes the pictures were fine. Like, I feel like if they just got this down, so in search and destroy, the pictures are fine, because I know that sometimes it was a little bit hard to see, but with the pictures, you could tell who was alive, who was left. Is it 4 versus 2, 2 versus 1, or whatever the case was.
right,
But between rounds, that's when they should show the stats. That's when we want to see, like, is somebody 0-8 or is somebody 7-1 who's using a sniper? Like, so between rounds, show us what the stats are. Whereas if you're watching a respawn game mode, we don't care about the pictures because there's so much happening. Like, those pictures are always, somebody's alive, somebody's dead, somebody has dead silence or whatever. So in respawn, just show us what's going on in the scoreboard. Just let us see, is somebody on an 8 streak? Is somebody 20-4 or whatever? So I feel like that's why we said earlier that all the tools are there. We just have to,
figure out how to
tune
use
in
them.
when to use which ones.
Well,
So
honestly, especially on day one, match one, during Hardpoint, hearing he's on an 8 streak and having nowhere to reference that. Like
exactly.
nowhere on the screen could I'm like, okay, guys, I understand what you're trying to do, but Call of Duty is the first person shooter. It's not a first person shooter. It's not one of many. It is the first person shooter. And then I'm hearing people, oh, well, you should watch CS:GO. I've watched CS:GO. It's 100% search and destroy, even though that's not whatever you want to call it, all the time.
Yep.
It's a game mode where, because I felt like third person did work well in search, but it's like
Oh
you're watching,
yeah.
it's a different type of game. You can't compare the two. And it was funny because the person that I was talking about that was tweeting, they used the name of someone who was a good observer in CS, and the person that they used
Oh
responded and basically
yeah.
said, actually, for a game like Call of Duty where it's fast-paced killing and jumping and sliding and going through
Yep.
doors, and you actually don't want to use third person as much. Like it's a good feature, but and so I mean, and we can put this to bed because I think there's no one that doesn't agree with us. It's like
Yeah, right. We're
I,
just preaching to the choir at
yeah,
this point.
we're preaching to the choir. I feel like that was one of those things that I'm happy I saw change throughout the weekend, but I mean, if I had to call out necessary changes, when you highlight players, you can't highlight an orange player in bright orange. You can't highlight a yellow player in bright yellow. It makes it so that we can't see them. Um, and I don't necessarily agree, DZ. I'll talk about your comment. We need Katie. Um, they did everybody dirty if you think of it that way. They told everyone at the last minute whether they were going to be there or not.
Yeah,
Like
that's terrible.
that was unfortunate, but and I tweeted at Katie. You
Oh
know, she
yeah.
just reached her subscriber goal, I think, for the entire year of 2020 in one weekend because of the support she got. And now she's probably going to be a full-time streamer. And so her life was changed for the better out of a worse situation. She made the most of it. So bravo to her, for doing what she did. I think this Praggy, I've never seen her before. I thought she did great. She got better throughout the weekend. The only reason people would hate on her is because they're comparing her to Katie, who's like good friends with Study and Nameless and all in and plays with them. And, and of course, that's a person you see on stream all the time. You're going to want them. I thought she did a great job last year. But, things change and personalities change. Brycey was upset he wasn't casting at all. He'll probably cast the London event. I would think they would hire him for the London event. So we'll see. Before I move on to my grading and everything, I'm just going to read this list. Demon, thank you for subscribing. Oh, you subscribed 7 hours ago when we weren't even here. Thank you, though, for your subscription. Toasty, White Objective, Rich Living Mike,
Oh
Cam Allen,
yeah.
Horizontal, Herx, Davy, Deviated, Taser, Somebody, Maybe, Vital, The Foreign Shadow, Franklin, Mista, Judy, and Sway Shocks. Thank you guys.
Oh
And whoever just followed.
yeah.
Thank you guys. Oh, that was Shocks. Thank you guys for all the follows. We appreciate you guys. So, my overall grade for the event, I'm going to be a little more generous than you were, and I'm going to give it a B plus. Um,
We're in the
if
same ballpark.
yeah, if you fix the experience as an observer and have the times be a little more on, and maybe the camera angles. Look, okay, so you could call me an event coordinator. When I was a pastor for 15 years, and I ran a very large church, and I had to run our Easter service every year at a stadium, and I had to coordinate over 200 volunteers. I had to get the police, and it was just crazy. But camera angles matter. If you don't fill a room, and we had like 3,000 people in our room, but if you don't fill a room, you got to show an angle that makes the room look full. And during like the concert that they did with the shredders, it was like
There's
you're
like
showing
50
us,
people.
yeah, it's like you're showing us how empty this place is, and that's not what you want to show on camera, to a live
No.
broadcast to 60,000 people. Like you don't want to show them the online experience because you can't show people how many people are online. So bring it in tight and show it close. And if you have to, just show the shredders and just put them. So we think that there's this huge audience that they're performing to. Just show them. And so there's some production stuff that's where I really think that they could have knocked this out of the park and hit a home run. I felt like the graphics they used. I felt like the desk, I felt like TP was freaking on point. Like that dude, he should live there. I'm happy they never moved him. They switched out Nameless and Momo and all these other people, but they didn't switch out TP.
He
Um,
did a good job for sure.
the casters did great because they brought the duos that had already casted together back. That was genius. Like, putting Chance with Benson and Maven and Merc, they're never gonna break up. They're like, they're probably holding hands, skipping through some daisies right
They're the
now.
duo, man.
But they're great. They're freaking awesome. The Shredders did shred. They're funny, Franklin. Um, but I really felt like to knock this out of the park, it was really just the little things that they're gonna iron out, like the production and all of that. They handled difficulty really well. Um, I'll see if I can find the schedule, DZ. I have to give you permission, or one of the mods can. But they handled difficulty really well. They handled the Kobe Bryant really well. Um, they
Yeah, they
handled
did a good job.
they handled the weird. No, well, I'll say they handled the thing with Minnesota and the Gorillas as best they could, because it was like you can't go into the next match and not tell us what happened. Like I'm sitting there as an observer, like what? Like what do you mean it's 1-1 now? It was just 2-0. Like and if I'm one of the Gorillas, I'm tweeting the same thing. Yeah, we lost 2-2. Like,
Yeah.
but they did their best, and so I would give them a B plus because I felt like overall, um, The viewership was good. I know that, and the things that I pay attention to is what do you do after tournaments? And I've always complained that MLG didn't get the matches up fast enough, and that's why all these other people that re-upload their streams were getting all the views. I didn't see a lot of that, so I think they actually took away that ability for people to just straight up take the entire match without putting yourself in it like you do. I don't think you can do that anymore without getting copyright. But um, the matches were up within 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Like
it was great.
it was very, I was like, thank you for going in, highlighting the VOD and putting it up on YouTube because YouTube allows you to do it that fast. And so
Yeah.
I really, I think the after production was really good. I noticed there was hundreds of thousands of views on some of the matches already, which is what you want. You know, you want to grow that YouTube channel because that's going to be your main streaming platform for the rest of the year. We didn't put this in here, but I did want your opinion if you have one, and maybe in the chat you guys can say, what do you think about YouTube? Like using YouTube versus Twitch, and how was the viewing experience for YouTube versus Twitch?
Well, like so I saw an interview with Hex and how he was talking about how obviously it just seems like YouTube is the future of, you know, like this esports viewership thing, just because that's where the biggest audience is. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, just because like every live streamer that has left Twitch has seen their numbers diminish greatly.
I know
So
from
I don't
experience.
yeah, I don't know how much I agree with that, but I think it's a decent spot. I mean, especially if something like that could ever get integrated even to like YouTube TV. I mean, that's another outlet where you could easily take something from a YouTube broadcast and put it on YouTube TV. I do think that in terms of their live streams, there's a little bit of an issue with resolution.
Yeah.
There are times when, I mean, I had this text thread with my buddies that I've played with forever where like sometimes like you'll have it pinged at 1080 at 68 frames and it just looks blurry and grainy and you can't really tell what's going on.
Yep.
So I mean, I think there are just, you know, a couple issues here and there, but I don't know. It's the first one, right? It's the first time this has happened. It's the first production of it. There's going to be little things, but I'm certainly not going to kill them over it.
No, of course. And so what you said in the beginning is absolutely true. YouTube has, I think they even have more live viewers right now than anybody else, but they have more, like,
Oh
there's, I think there's, in a
yeah.
minute, there's like a million uploads on YouTube every minute or something like crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
it's insane.
it's ridiculous. And so everybody's on YouTube. But what don't you get to do on YouTube that you're used to doing on Twitch? Post your emotes from your own stream and promote yourself, or from streams that you subscribe to. So when I'm watching the Twitch chat and somebody puts Scump's little GG when the Huntsmen win, then it's like, oh, I'm supporting Scump. I'm subscribed to him, and I'm saying GG to Scump with my subscription benefits. And the people in the chat are talking about having the same problems, which I had as well. Franklin, I'm glad you had uh, a great experience. I had the same thing
Yeah,
where it was
good for
like
you.
it kept going up and down and back and forth, and it was like good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad.
Yep.
And so for me, I had a very similar experience. But what you're saying is right about YouTube being the future. But I will tell you, I had a show on this channel, on my Kingdom Soldier channel, and I was convinced by a few people over at MLG TV when it was a thing, because Optic had all left and went to MLG.TV, signed a contract. And so, and they experienced a loss in their numbers. And then I was like, well, if Optic goes, everybody's going. So then I went over to MLG.TV. We switched our channel. We did this whole big thing. We never got as many subscribers as we had when we were on Twitch. We never got the same number of people watching. It was always, and I mean, like Puckett volunteered to come on the show and help us promote the new show and all this, and but it wasn't the same as Twitch. And we came back to
Yeah.
Twitch, and we had basically lost a portion of our audience, and so it was a mistake to leave Twitch, in my opinion. Now, for what I asked Merck today is is it a conflict when you have all these pro players streaming on Twitch and then you're streaming the events on YouTube? Is it, and not a conflict like as far as legally, but is it a conflict in promotion and brand? You know, um, because the number one question I saw on Twitter when this event started was, where is it? You know,
Yeah.
where is it at? where can I watch? Where can I watch? And then I went looking. I'm like, oh, it's obvious. So I go looking for tweets, and I'm like, dang, they're kind of buried. I got to find them here and there. Um, and then I didn't know if it was because the actual channel name is the MLG COD channel. It's not actually called Call of Duty League. That's like the name that they were able to change it to. But the actual URL is official MLG COD. And so it's the old school MLG channel. And so and I heard from people that were watching it on MLG TV because I guess it is available there. The quality was better, but they're not promoting that. They're on purpose probably. And so I think YouTube is going to be fine. Kevy Skills, who is the goat of Twitch chats, said that he is sending an email um, to Fwiz about how to make the chat better and more interactive because you can't watch the chat on YouTube. You can't.
Right.
There's no mods, and it's like cancer in there. Like that chat was crazy. I was like, yeah, I'm not watching this. I'm not watching this. I'm not watching
And
this.
if you do want full screen, the chat like takes up the left side of your screen. Like it's taking up your screen real estate to watch the chat if you have it full screen.
Oh, that's a good
So
point. Yeah,
so
and
I don't know. It just seems like this is becoming like a theme kind of that it's the first one. I think all this stuff will get better over time.
it will.
Like think about it. Like if it's January 2021, we're probably not having any of these issues just because it's already been done for a year and this stuff has all been ironed out. So I think it'll get there. It's just
Yeah.
we'll suffer for an event or two and then it'll be all right.
I think now the one thing I will say, the reason why I'm up in the B plus range for the event, and I guess if we move to GG's for like what I loved, we kind of have talked about it, but and we've talked about what could be better, but I'll say that for me, it was an event, if that makes sense. It was more than just some Call of Duty games. It was an actual event where, and even though none of this happened, Gary did not play Hex. All of the basketball stars and celebrities didn't
Yeah.
play each other.
Yep.
Like none of that happened. All we saw was the shredders, but it felt like an event, and the home team felt like the home team. Like when the Rocker were
Yeah.
introduced, especially day two, it was like, whoa, like
I'm glad that you touched on that because like that's a massive thing. Like I've seen this all over. There's a good chance that like those 5 players would have never gotten that response in any other format.
no,
But
Optic is the only ones
since
that
they
can
were
get that.
getting, yep, exactly.
You basically are getting to get treated like old school Optic Gaming at your home.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I like it.
I love it. And GodRX, I think, tweeted out, which is embarrassing. He should have way more, but I think he said like he reached 12K followers on Twitter, and it was like, well, yeah, people know, like you feel low key like a superstar. Like, man, I'm Scum.
Yep.
Like walking out here like, dang, this is great. All right, so let's move on. Unless you guys in the chat, if you have anything you want to share about the event overall, what you thought was good and bad, but let's move on to our favorite moment and or match. And I'll start. For me, I'm a Seattle fan because I live in Seattle and I'm a dad. So I'm a Seattle dad. I mean, it just makes sense. But I would say my favorite match to watch, unfortunately, was when they got booed. Every Aches moment was priceless, Franklin. Aches is
They
great.
always are.
I love Aches because how he responds to it. He's like, I'm going to Los Angeles. You got to stay in Minnesota. Like I was like, oh, the shade has been thrown. But honestly, and I hate to say it, but watching New York versus FaZe was wildly entertaining to me. I honestly was not
Wow.
that entertained by the Chicago Dallas. And let me pull something up for you guys. So this is the peak viewership, and you can see what. Hold up, I'm gonna cover my face even. You can see what the top 5 were, and surprisingly, you see Seattle's up there on the bottom with 1 and 2, and we were kind of with 4 and 5. We were debating why that is, but that FaZe versus New York match, 62,000. That match was really, really fun to watch because the way that, and I'll say when FaZe dismantled Dallas. Like watching FaZe play Call of Duty is I was mesmerized by how good they looked. And TP said it. He said, I don't think people understand how hard this is to do at a pro level. Like to 6-0 professional players from New York and Dallas. These are teams that have storied good search players on their teams, and they're 6-0ing them in search and destroy. I liked the FaZe New York match. That was probably my favorite match to watch. My favorite moment, I'll have to think about that one. I'll let you, Icon, talk about your favorite match of the weekend.
Yeah, my favorite match by far was just the first one. Chicago Dallas for me. It was the kickoff. Even though now I'll say this, even though there were like a lot of quirks, it was the hardest to watch just because it seemed like every 5 seconds they were trying to play with one of their new broadcast toys.
Yep.
So it was the hardest to watch. But for me, it just seemed like it had the most intensity. It seemed to have the most hype around it.
Yeah.
It kind of, I don't know, for me it built up. Even that last game, it was the only map of the weekend. That last game, that domination game where Chicago closed it out on Dallas, I got goosebumps on my neck. It was such a, I don't know, it was just such a moment for me. But then, like we actually talked about earlier with the Optic Gaming one, you're right in that even though they seem to have lost a lot of, their backing and the quote unquote green wall,
Mm.
you're right. If they tweet out that they're playing, it's going to 3 million people.
Which is why it was
So
the most watched match.
exactly. So in terms of viewership, it's just when you have an account like that tweeting it out, more people are seeing it, so more people are probably, tuning in. But yeah, for me personally, it was Chicago, Dallas. I feel like there was so much hype around it. I feel like for the last 4 months, Crim6, put something at the end of his intro video. And then when Chicago released their team, like their roster reveal, Scump
Yeah.
had that in the end of their roster reveal. So it's just like it was a culmination of like 3 or 4 months of trash talk for me. I loved all the matches, but that one, I don't know, that one was just the best for me, in my opinion.
So I anticipated that one with just as much as you did, like to be honest. Like I was watching like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be crazy. This is gonna be amazing. Let me get my popcorn out and get ready. And it just was underwhelming
Yeah.
of a match. I wanted to see game 5. I wanted to see round 11. I wanted to see Scump versus Crim 1v1 for the match. Like I wanted to see the excitement that I saw in some of these other matches, like, Toronto versus Minnesota or when the Gorillas even played Minnesota. Like I wanted to see a grudge match, and that's one of the things I liked about the Seattle matches is they went 5 games. Like that's why I liked them. Like I love the team, but I also was just like, yeah, Redneck, they're S&D, they got to fix it. And I'm not throwing shade at Nubsy, but they need better coaching. I mean, that's the only. I don't know how else to say it. I just think he, as a coach, needs to focus in. And what I would do if I was their team, and I'm not a competitive player, there's at least I would whoever is the in-game leader for search on their team would have to boot camp, like with some S&D star, like um they'd have to like literally boot camp and figure out the game in a different way and so that they could play it different because I felt like, and I'm going on a tangent, but I wanted to talk about Seattle. I felt like Seattle, they turtled a lot and they just were too slow. Teams are playing search fast in this game. They're not waiting like everybody. I mean, I know Redneck, but it just didn't show. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody was expecting like everybody's just gonna wait for dead silence and then they're gonna move quickly. But you got like Pristini running around the map, and of course Faze was crazy. You just couldn't keep up with where the heck they were. They were gonna snipe you before you even thought about it through the smoke. Doesn't matter. They knew what
Yeah.
positions to get into. They knew where to move. And you can kind of talk about that. Like what do you think Icon Seattle needs to work on specifically in their search game? Like what did you see when you watched that they need to work on?
So I'm glad that you mentioned Pristini because we talked about this a little bit, but even though if you look at Pristini's stats, he was sub 1.0 in terms of his search and destroy KD. Or it was he had a 1.5. So nothing,
You said
nothing
search KD.
crazy. Yeah, his search KD, he had a 1.05. Whereas if you're looking at Atlanta for comparison, Major Maniac had like a 6.5, Celium had a 5. So like, his stats weren't crazy. You would say that a 1.05 is pretty in terms of a search KD. But
Yeah.
what's happening is a 1.5 from somebody like Pristini, who is constantly moving around the map, who's constantly pushing lanes. What's happening is that he's able to take that information and relay positions to his teammates. Whereas if you take somebody else that had a 1.5 that was playing it more traditionally, like, sometimes what you might see from Seattle, if you're just holding down lanes, you're not really providing as much intel to your teammates or to the rest of your team. So
Right.
I just feel like a lot of these teams are still, of course they're trying to figure out their way, but they're playing this game how they might have played, other, different games in the past that were a little bit slower. So yeah, in terms of Seattle, somebody has to kind of take a charge there and push lanes a little bit, because that's the way that this game is played. You can't just sit back and watch lanes, because the time to kill is so fast that you have to be taking people by surprise.
Right.
And that didn't happen very often for Seattle.
They
But
never took anyone by surprise, in my opinion.
yeah, and for me, we were just talking about exciting matches here. That's why, for me, Florida, I know that they played Seattle, but Florida was so much fun to watch, not
Yes.
only because all of their games went, to game 5. It's just everything is so fast all the time, and they're always pushing lanes, and there's so much happening. Whereas, some of these more traditional teams aren't playing that way at the moment.
I like how you call them traditional teams instead
Yeah,
of old.
it is traditional. Yeah.
All right, let me see this comment. It's not sustainable with Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas alone. They aren't dominant enough in respawn to rely on that. But that team isn't going to destroy with pure gun skill. They need better positioning and strats. I agree, Ixtel. I agree. And I think that's kind of what Icon was talking about. And that's why I said it's coaching. I heard TP say some stuff on the stage that they need to hear. But Teep will be the first person to say how hard it is to coach. Like coaching superstars that are getting paid more money than you, in some cases probably 3 times as much, has got to be difficult. Like I've got 3 rings. I have more money from playing Call of Duty than anybody in this game. What are you going to tell me? And I'm not saying that's how Karma's attitude is, but it's got to be difficult, to coach those guys. The problem is, even if they have someone take charge, you still have a bunch of guys who aren't really considered. You're absolutely right, Redneck, but I feel like you need someone that they're going to listen to that actually knows a little bit more than they do. Because right now, I don't know who their IGL is, but I mean, and maybe it's app. Maybe that's the game mode he takes over. He can move pretty quickly.
And
Go ahead.
And see, this is what I. So you look at the players on Seattle,
Mhm.
all seasoned vets, all pros. But that's, if you look at Chicago's roster, he gets a lot of flack. But that's why Gunless is so good. He's not afraid to play like the legend. He's not afraid to tell the legends of the
He
game
doesn't care.
what they need to be doing.
No, he doesn't
I
care.
broke down a video. I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. You featured it on one
I
of your
watched it.
things,
Yep.
but he just, like, he's not afraid to come out and tell it how it is and get in people's faces. And that's what, imagine him on Seattle, where a lot of good players, but sometimes you need to be told what you need to be told. And that's what he does for Chicago. Like, I'm looking at Seattle stats right now, and for respawn game types, they were all basically right around 1 or a little bit above 1. But in search and destroy, like Enable had a 0.5, Slacked had a 0.6. Like everybody was below a 1.0 KD in search, other than Apathy. So you're right. They just need somebody to just get in their face and tell them no, or maybe not even get in their face. Just step up and be that leader and tell people, this is where we need to be. This is the strat we need to be doing. This is how we need to counter what Atlanta's doing or whoever they're playing, because that's what Atlanta does so good. Look at the stats that you have on screen right now. Those are insanity. A 14 KD, a 6.5 KD, a 5 KD. I mean, that's like, you might not have that from one player the rest of the year. So, I mean,
Facts.
yeah, I don't know. I just think they need somebody to step up and have strats and how to counter those strats and stuff like that.
And that's where honestly I guess that get rid of enable and get okay. So here's the deal with Vital. This is franchising. This isn't like let censor play. This isn't like you just get rid of people. This is a different time for Call of Duty. Um,
Yep, it
and you
is.
you don't get to just be like, well, we don't want you anymore. Let's DM somebody else and pick him up. And this is franchising, so these guys have to figure it out. This is like after the NBA trade deadline type stuff. This is not it's not we're not in that place anymore. Um, Peak viewership for Chicago versus Atlanta. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't even it wasn't. Oh, I see what you're saying. Peak viewership will be, yeah. That's my son in the background, guys. Peak viewership will be when Chicago plays Atlanta. Probably every time they play each other, especially if they only play 4 times out of the 12 tournaments. Um, okay, so
One thing, real quick,
yeah, go
one thing
ahead.
I'll touch on before we move on is that I've spent, so just a little bit more from my background, I've spent basically the last 12, 13 years of my life coaching like 15 to 18-year-olds. And sometimes, like, I feel like this is what these guys need is that sometimes you just can't be afraid to just step in
Oh
there and tell them what needs to be done.
yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, with Nubsy, I don't know how much something like that would be happening. I'm sure that he's a great coach. I'm sure that
Yeah.
strategy wise and breaking down film, he probably knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But uh, but like you said, like Octane Karma, how much if you have Karma on your team, somebody that's won 3 rings, how much do you push there and how much does he accept it? So
It's
I
true.
think with Seattle, they have all the talent in the world. They have the talent to win.
Yeah.
Somebody's just got to get it out of them.
Yeah. What's up, Dan? Sorry for not. I know I was supposed to message you and tell you uh, when I was going live. My bad. That's a good question. Can anybody else answer that? Or maybe Icon, who is on the bench for Seattle? I don't even know. Oh wait, it's
Um,
I just followed them and they followed me back on Twitter. Isn't it like dang it. This was yesterday
Pander
though.
and Proto. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Yep. Panda and Proto. Um so I yeah, I think Seattle is going to have a good year. They just need to work on search and destroy, and they'll get there. It's just gonna be, it's gonna take them some time, um, to get there. So, all right, let's move on from favorite moment or match to unexpected results. And and you guys can also put this in. Yeah, it's very early, Junkhead. You're right. You guys can put this in the chat. Biggest letdown, and biggest upset, like kind of biggest surprise victory and biggest letdown. But before I go there, we're gonna take a literally like 1 minute break, and we'll be uh right back, guys.
Good.
uh, Switch over. All right, guys, we're back. Thank you for letting me take a break to go to the bathroom. LA biggest surprise. Seattle was my personal letdown just because Carmen's my favorite player. GG's, and I just feel like those are two teams that should beat with that kind. You're talking about LA Optic? Is that who you're talking about? And then Paris domination, Kismet, freaking. I'm gonna find his stats, guys, because that dude fried. But I'm gonna let you start, Icon. What was your biggest surprise and biggest letdown of the weekend, or biggest letdown, biggest surprise, however you want to say it?
So this was just kind of a I don't know, like my small moment to shine is that I just didn't see I didn't see Shotzi and Illy performing well. Just because
Hmm.
as when I went into this, I got roasted on my channel for calling a 3-1 for Chicago, so a 3-1 Chicago over, and I just couldn't imagine Illy and Shotzi stepping up and the launch of a brand new league. It's the first time they've been in this scenario. I just felt that Chicago was going to be dominant in that regards. So
Right.
I don't know. That's one that I think I pegged fairly well. But in terms of my biggest letdown would probably be New York. Going in, I had New York as in my power rankings, like in that 6 to 7 range. And now it's early for everybody, but in terms of respawns, they went 1-4, and the one map that they won was the most dominant map that we've probably saw all weekend. That map that they had against Atlanta when they won that domination map,
Yeah.
that was probably the most dominant single map that we saw all weekend, other than like the 6-0s in Search and Destroy that we saw every once in a while. But so for them to show what they could do in that domination match against Atlanta,
Hmm.
0-4 and then 0-2 in Search the rest of the way, I would say that they were probably my biggest letdown. And then easily for me, the biggest surprise for me was Paris. Now, going into this, I'll say that I didn't really know much from Paris just because they haven't scrimmed much, right?
Right.
I can't even tell you how many maps of scrims I've watched. So they're
A
just a
million.
team that is, yeah, probably, but it's just a team that like we didn't really see much, we didn't really know much about, we didn't know their tendencies, and for them to put together what they put together, I thought for sure they were the biggest surprise. Being able to, take a 3-2 over OGLA, and then being able to win in that search and destroy at the end too. I mean, just think about it. The first time that a lot of them have been in that scenario, not all of them, but quite a few of them have been in that scenario. To take a fifth map S&D against OGLA in that sort of scenario, it shows that they're pretty calm, cool, and collected. And then going into this, I had watched London quite a bit. I probably saw, I don't know, 30 maps of the London Royal Ravens play. And I thought that in terms of respawns, they were pretty good. So in that matchup between Paris and London, I thought London was probably going to win that like 3-1, 3-2, and they just got absolutely blown out.
What
So,
happened there?
uh, well, I guess it wasn't blown out. Like the hard point, they won by like 35. The search, they won by a couple rounds, and then the dom, they won by like 20. So I guess they weren't blown out, but London's first match. So when they played New York, they looked like easily one of those top 5 teams. But then when they played Paris the next day or a couple days later, it was completely opposite. So
Yeah.
I don't know. They just came out looking a little bit different in that first matchup against New York. Man, even the Search and Destroy, they were dominant. Scraps and Wuskin, watching them play Search and Destroy,
Fried.
yeah, it was insanity. And then
Fried.
against Paris, they came out and they just, I don't know, they looked kind of average. So yeah, good on Paris, because I think, imagine coming into a tournament, everybody's picking you last in the power rankings all across the internet. You're last, and then being able to perform like that, go 2-0 on the weekend against pretty good teams. Good for them. They were for sure my biggest surprise.
Okay, so I'm gonna address Dallas. I gotta do it, and I know you have an opinion about Dallas as well. That's kind of similar to mine, but they're talking about it in the chat.
Okay.
So number one, all of these teams played 2 matches. There's no bracket. There's no losers. There's no losers rounds. There's no getting to play other teams to see where you actually compare. The number one
Yep.
question I have, if anyone is going to say that Dallas just went from number 2 to number 12, if you really see them that way in power rankings, which are rankings of where you think a team is going to land at the end of things, not kind of their standings, but if you look at power rankings and people that are going to put Dallas way at the bottom, the only thing I would say is name a team other than Chicago and Faze, because that's the two teams they played, that would not lose to Chicago and Faze. Like now, the
We talked about that a
3-0,
little bit earlier.
the
Yep.
3-0 was a little bit, I mean, that was unfortunate. I thought Dallas was going to put up a better fight. Even Priest said that in his interview, like he thought Dallas was going to put up a better fight. But in my opinion, I went into this saying Dallas is going to leave this 0-2. Scump and Formal, when you have fire in Scump's veins, there's nothing stopping this guy. And they wanted to beat Krim so bad, it didn't matter if Krim had all of Faze up on the stage with him. Chicago would have won. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's how badly they wanted to win. And still, at this point in his career, Scump is like LeBron. He can just find superhuman strength and go crazy, when necessary. And so I can't really lower Dallas way too much while looking at them from playing the best two teams, the obvious best two teams in the game. Now, I definitely thought Dallas was number 2, and now I wouldn't have them number 2 in power rankings for sure. There's no way I'd put them number 2 over Chicago. I wouldn't do that. But I'm not judging them as harshly as everyone else. Now, of course, this is the same fan base that anytime anyone talks against the green wall, they would go crazy, even if it was true. Even when Optic was losing, there was people tweeting how great Optic was in the chat, on streams and on Twitter. There's people tweeting about, oh, Optic is so amazing and they're so good, and it's like, well, no, they're losing to everybody. Like these are some of the worst placements we've ever, like World War II. Like these are some of the worst placements we've ever seen them have, and people are like, yeah, but they're the goats. And so, of course, we have a contingency of people that are going to flame Optic Gaming no matter what. They're going to flame Dallas because Krim is a villain. However, I will say that Dallas has put together one of the best rosters this year, in my opinion. I think Hastro did a very good job. I think he got great leadership. He got great young talent. And for the long term of 2020, that's a good roster. And they have a lot of potential. And that's just my opinion. I know you have an opinion as well. Envoy is a beast. I'm not saying, now before you talk, I'm not saying Chicago is not good, guys. Like, don't get me wrong. Chicago is that is a GOAT roster, great team. Envoy is going to continue to fry this year and get better and better and better. And, Icon was telling me earlier before the show, he thinks this is going to be a breakout year for Envoy. He's going to become well known because people don't even know how talented he is yet. So I'll let you talk about the Dallas thing, Icon.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. When I made my predictions were based on just the here and now. And I even said in some of those videos that if I was making these predictions 5 months down the road, it'd probably be a little bit different because there wouldn't be quite the nerves and whatnot from some of the younger players from Dallas. But just all you have to do is just run through the rosters. So Scump, world champ, unfazed. Formal, world champ. Arcides, world champ. Gunless, maybe doesn't, he's not to the heights of the other threes in terms of success, but he's a proven player that doesn't get phased by anything, and he's been there before. And Envoy. So Envoy's like the newbie for Chicago.
Yeah.
But look at Envoy was probably MVP last year had Simp and Simp's team not had the success that they had. So right. Envoy, even though he's young, he just turned 20, he's been proven. Whereas if you look at Dallas, Clayster, Krim, Hugh, proven, Illy, and Shotzi, you don't know what you have with them. Now, right. You play online in the comfort of their own home and they fry and they're fantastic and whatnot, but it's a whole different story when you're sitting in front of, however many people were at the event and 100,000 people online. It's totally different. So I think Dallas is going to get there. That's something where if you put yourself in that situation enough, you're going to learn from it, and it'll just become normal.
Right.
Oh,
that I think Dallas is going to have to.
They're going to have to what?
They're just going to have to get through those growing pains for Dallas.
I agree. I think your voice might have cut out, but I think you're still there. So, my biggest.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for all the follows, guys. I see him coming through. I'll call him out in a minute. My biggest surprise, was this. I did not expect Methods to fry like he fried against Seattle. Like 1.4 in hardpoint, 1.33 in S&D, 1.32 in Dom. This dude just went off. He went crazy. I was looking at stats and I did not expect to see this. I was like, wait, what the heck? I was like, oh my, jeez. And Toronto is the team that probably will use their substitutes. If anybody uses their substitutes, it'll be Toronto. They have a legitimate team of people that could play. Methods was the clear number one player. I think Icon was saying that earlier. Methods was the clear number one player on their team, and he did a great job. My biggest surprise, I guess. Dave, can you turn that down? I can hear that on stream. Sorry guys, I was asking my son to turn on his iPad. My biggest surprise and letdown, I guess, was I gotta say Paris as well. I honestly did not see them winning both of those matches. I didn't see them winning either one. I did not have them beating Optic Gaming. I think they talked a little too much mess after that one. But then when they beat London, I was like, oh, okay. You guys are legit. And because because every team isn't going to be at every weekend, which is unfortunate.
Oh, yeah.
They even have potential of kind of placing top 4 at a couple of these events, just depending on what mix. Like if you look at the bracket for London, the way that the brackets are going to work out for London, it's I actually just want to pull it up. So the way that the bracket is going to work out for London, let's just put it on the screen. So
but as you're pulling that up,
yeah.
let me say something real quick about Methods. So the nice thing about Toronto, like you talked about, is that they have essentially 10 people on their roster. So think about where they fried, right? Think about where they succeeded. They were 3-0 in search. And that's why they were able to win that match against Seattle. But if you look at their respawns, nobody performed. If you go look at the stats, in terms of their respawn KDs, Methods was the only one that was above 1. So I like that you have his stats up there. He was definitely a surprise. But then when you go look at his at the SND stats, almost everybody from Toronto was above 1. So that kind of goes into their team makeup a little bit, to where if you have 5 extra subs and you can play actual 5v5 matches against each other in-house, and you can talk about those strats and draw them up, where they're missing is that they don't quite have the SMG talent, the slaying power that the other teams have.
Facts.
But having somebody like Methods where you can just kind of rely on and somebody you can count on, all they have to do is just develop that slaying power, and they're going to be a good team. Just, I don't know, probably top half of the power rankings. I know we'll talk about those later, but they were a surprise for sure.
So here's the deal. And it still stands. I think Rambo or Big Timer was one of the first ones to say it. S&D wins championships. It still does. If you can win your S&Ds, you technically, could get beat if you don't pick up one of the. But if you can pick up one respawn and win your S&Ds, you're good. And
which is why nobody's going to beat Atlanta. And which is why you can't count out Dallas. You can't
Exactly.
count out Dallas because
Exactly.
they're also so good at search and destroy.
Yeah. If they got to play search against a team that wasn't wanting to beat the mess out of them, that basically wasn't Chicago or Atlanta, we would have really seen them shine even more in search. I mean, we got to see a little bit of it versus Chicago, but I mean, I how does Atlanta lose?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
it's, it's gonna be difficult. But I did want to show you guys.
I really
Go ahead.
I do feel like it's the two teams. I think that Atlanta and Chicago have distanced themselves from everybody else. Then there's a lot of teams kind of like in that 3 through 10, 3 through 11 range.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing with Chicago is that I thought they would be better in search and destroy, but that second map against Dallas for Chicago, that was kind of pathetic. I mean, they got absolutely ran through by Dallas.
Yeah.
So that's going to
Yeah.
be their Achilles heel. Now against OGLA on the second day, they took that 6-2 and it was pretty easy. But yeah, we'll see if they're able to develop that. Go ahead. I see what you have up on screen here. I like it.
As other teams get better, here's the thing. As other teams get better, Chicago's going to have to continue to get better at search. Because teams like Seattle will get better at search. Chicago's going to have to get better at search because other teams are going to get better at search. New York is going to get better at search. But Faze has such a gap on the competition in search and destroy right now because these guys have all played with each other for like 2 years in little online tournaments and stuff. And Simps kind of, I mean, he's proved he's such a GOAT, but then, I mean, he wasn't even kind of number one on his team, and so, I mean, if you look at those search and destroy stats, like you said, there's a 17, a 10, like these guys just fried in search, and they didn't fry against like little teams that would be easy to beat. Like, yeah, I thought they were gonna win, but I thought it'd be like 6-3, 6-2, 6-4, even not 6-0, 6-0. Like that was. Go ahead.
If we're talking about search and destroy in specific, there's one team where search and destroy alone held them up, and that's the Los Angeles Guerrillas. They were 3-0 in search and destroy other than that forfeit. So at the end of the day, they were 2-1, but they were 3-0.
Yeah.
Your boys from Seattle were 0-4.
Yeah.
And so just imagine Minnesota, they were really high. They were fourth on my power rankings. They were 5-1 in respawns over the weekend, but they were 0-2 in search. Now they were 1-1 because of that forfeit. Yeah. But if they can develop a search game, Minnesota's really freaking good.
And as you mentioned, the Ultra did not lose a search this weekend.
Yep. They were 3-0.
And so search and destroy is important. There's teams that went home without a win because of it, because they didn't play it well enough. And there's teams that went home 1-1 because they did a good job in it, or even who was it that was, it wasn't Faze. Was it the Paris versus London where Paris just like bullied them in search? I forget what the score of that match was. But
it was 6-4 Paris versus London.
Yeah, but I'll say that even though it was 6-4, it was kind of like, because wasn't it a comeback? Was that the one where it was like they were down and then they won like 4 or 5 rounds in a row?
It might have been. I don't remember.
I missed the end of I missed the end of that one, unfortunately, because I think that was when the Kobe Bryant thing happened and I just stopped watching.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. And so you thought the Rocker were gonna get smashed? The pros were having them as a top 4 team. Like,
yeah, I had them at 4 for sure.
All pros had them at top 4. So what I have on the screen is the London groups, and I think it's very interesting how in London, number one, the suckiest thing is Faze is not going to be there. That is one of the most unfortunate things about this event is Faze is not going to be there, and I guarantee you, people that are not on Twitter and don't pull up the website are not going to pay attention, and they're going to be like, when does Faze play? Like the old school, when does Optic play? When does Faze play? When am I going to see Simp? And people are going to be like, they're not actually playing this weekend. I think it's very interesting the way this is divided, where you have Toronto, London, New York, and Paris, and you really only have one North American team. I know Toronto is kind of, I mean, they're part of North America, but it's, a different country. But it's like, really, New York is the only team over there that has like a boosting roster that we're used to seeing all the time. And then all of the others, we're talking about world championships, 4 rings, 2 rings, 2 rings, like all of them are on one side of this. You got Aches and, you've got Scump and you've got Crim and you've got Karma and everybody is on that side. And what that means is two of those teams on that left side in Group A are not going to go into the final bracket, and we're only going to get to see them play twice again. And then on Group B, two of those teams aren't going through, which honestly, most of
Well,
us go ahead.
just at least in the winners finals, there is a losers bracket.
No, but I'm saying the way that so like if Chicago loses, right? They go down to the losers bracket, and then if they win, they have
Oh,
an
I see what you're
opportunity.
saying.
You see what I'm saying?
They would play the other team on the left side of the bracket.
Right. So because
Yep, I got you.
only because two of these teams on each of the sides are not going to the final bracket. And
Yep.
so one of the things that I don't remember who it was that said this, but they were like 20 something million dollars is a lot of money to pay to have your team get knocked out of the bracket early. So maybe that's why it is this way. But if I'm let's say I'm Seattle and I don't learn search and I lose to Dallas, I go to the losers bracket and I lose to the Gorillas because they know how to play search better than me. And I now
Mm-hmm.
just played 2 matches and I'm out of the event. That sucks. As an investor, as someone who's got their brand on their jerseys, I'm like, hey, the broadcast was on for 2 more days, but my guy's already out. So it's like and I think they're fitting it into 2 days, a weekend, which means I think somebody did the math and there's got to be like 7 matches on the first day. So of course we're going to be behind in time and it's going to go till 12 o'clock at night and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be interesting the way they have these brackets. I'm like, how did they group these together? Why wouldn't they have put like Chicago in Group B and Dallas in Group A? That's just in my brain. Automatically, I would want those two teams in the final bracket from a viewership standpoint. Because if for some reason Chicago doesn't make it, and well, I don't think both of them wouldn't make it, but they're going to play each other if they beat those two teams. You're going to have Dallas and Chicago knock one of the other ones to the losers bracket and potentially be out. And so it's a very because you just have to win two, and then you get to go to the final bracket, which I should have put on the screen, but I don't have it on there. So it's going to be interesting. Paris versus New York is going to be interesting because New York's going to want to do a lot. Since we have this on the screen, if you had to pick right now, Icon, who would you have winning these matches?
Well, if I had to pick,
Just based on
I
what
would
you've
probably in Group B. Now, see, that's the thing. After that launch weekend, if I was to pick this before that launch weekend, I would have New York winning that matchup with Paris. But Paris was so dominant with the results of that launch weekend. I would probably go Paris and then London. I don't know why I still have so much faith in London, but I do. Just from watching them scrim over like the last 4 or 5 weeks, I just feel like they've been playing really well. So probably Paris and London in Group B. And then who knows? Maybe since that's in EU, maybe that would be a little bit different. It's kind of a home match, so maybe that matchup, maybe London would come out of that. But the left side, sorry, I hate to rag on your boys, but I feel Dallas and Chicago. I don't see how Seattle. So think about it.
Yep.
Seattle is going to lose those two search and destroy matchups.
They'll lose to all three of those teams probably because of search if they don't get it
in
together.
search, right? So even if Seattle was one of the most dominant hardpoint teams that existed, like they're still going to drop. All you have to do is get lucky in one of those respawns, and you're probably going to beat Seattle because of the searches. So on the left side, obviously, I'd probably go Dallas, Chicago, and I don't see how at this point in time you take Dallas over Chicago just off of the results from that first launch weekend. So if I had to pick a final, I don't know, Chicago, London, and then I think that would be an easy wrap. I think whoever makes it out of that left side is going to take the whoever's on the right.
So here's the challenge, though. You're the home team, right?
Yeah.
You're London. You get beat by Toronto. You go into the losers bracket and then get beat by Paris. And you're the home team.
I don't know.
And you don't even play on the next day. Like, how does that event go? Like,
I just don't.
That's hard to think about. Like,
I don't see London losing the respawns to Toronto.
No. Here's the deal. I don't either. But I didn't see Toronto beating Seattle technically, but they won the searches. But if it happens, so think about some of the teams that we don't see. Like, what if you're Seattle and they don't fix their search? Do they make it out of the group stage? Like when they're the home team, that's got to be. That's rough to think about. Is
I
that
will say,
Go ahead.
that I'm pumped to see the crowd that comes in London.
Oh my gosh. It
I
is,
just can't wait.
bro.
I feel like they're so just charismatic with like their home teams. I can't wait to see it. I'm
It
pumped to
is
see
going to. Oh yeah, there will be drinking allowed. You already know Tim Zyme, whatever your name is.
it.
And Benson will be leading it.
Yeah.
Benson was saying on the air, he was like, "Yeah, I went to get a drink and then I came back," and it's like, weren't you still casting? Like, um, they're, and I'm not saying Benson's like an alcoholic or anything. Don't get it twisted, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
Benson loves to have fun and he
Yeah,
loves
of
to rile
course.
up that London crowd, and that will be and that's where Scraps and Weskins will probably fry out and make it
They're
to
so good.
that final bracket because they're going to have their home crowd just going crazy behind them. It's an
But on
interest.
the
Go
other
ahead.
hand, will it be too much? You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
it's not like these are like it's not like it's LeBron James feeding off the energy of his home crowd.
yeah,
You know, I mean, ultimately, this is like a new thing. So, will
right.
that pressure be too much? Even though those are proven guys, right? They're all pretty proven.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, only time will tell. That's what's so awesome about this is that we can watch this happen and develop over time.
Well, and we're watching the teams develop over time. We're watching, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna look at some stats, real quick, guys. Hey, what's up, Landon? We're gonna look at some stats, guys, and Icon, what do you want to start with? We can do Dom. We can do top overall stats. We can do hard point, hill time. We can look at
I,
simp.
yeah, I mean, honestly, here's it kind of coincides with what we've already talked about. But to begin with here, the stats that stick out the most are really just the search and destroy stats for Atlanta because we've never seen anything like that, and I doubt that we ever will again. And
Right.
then when we were talking about how teams, some teams did well, some teams didn't do so hot. When you're going through and you're looking at like for Toronto, for an example, you can see why they struggled so much in respawn just because in terms of respawns, everybody had a sub 1 KD except for methods. So I don't know if there's any one person to, but with what we've already talked about, we can just see how it correlates. Even like New York. So like for New York, for example, I had them like 5th or 6th in my power rankings, but
Hmm.
with New York, everybody's respawn KD was negative. Everybody's hardpoint KD was negative. Everybody's SND and domination. So everybody's SND KD was negative. Accuracy had a .2 for SND. So like I don't know if
Oh,
calling out individual
yeah.
people or whatever is the way to go. I just think that if you look at the stats as a whole, you can tell why some teams didn't. I mean, it's in the stats. It's crystal clear why
Right.
some teams struggled at different things and
Oh,
some teams didn't.
Yeah.
yeah.
I kind of have the slideshow going it right now with just kind of all of them, and you guys can kind of look them over and call out what you want to call out. I thought it was interesting that Octane had the top hill time of the event. Um,
We talked about that earlier too.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Kind of what I captured, guys. The stats I wanted to share. And by the way, calling out my dude Cam Allen, follow him on Twitter. All of these stats he gives out for free. He has a document that's pinned to his tweet of all of the stats of every player. Simp fried out of his mind, was the GOAT, was the MVP. It's kind of unarguable. Especially after he said he had a bad Dom. I'm like, what? I was like, you call that bad? Like, and then he just goes off, in the final map, and that was, I mean, it was like watching, honestly, and I'm not just throwing shade towards like New York and Dallas, but it was kind of like watching the varsity team play the freshman team, watching Faze play against, and we're talking about playing against some of the best players we've seen on the sticks, like. And the shade was thrown by Aches at
Everybody, because
no
that's
no
what he
no
does.
at well yeah, but he threw shade at oh my gosh, what's his name? Bobble, John Bobble. What's his gamer tag? Why am I forgetting it? He used to be a pro player. He's their coach of New York. Um oh my, this is gonna kill me. They're gonna type it in the chat and I'm gonna feel like an idiot. Um
Coach of
Oh,
New York, you said?
yeah. Oh, well, I guess his name
Revan?
is
Yeah, Revan.
Revan. Yeah, his name is just Bobble now. Maybe that's why I don't know it. Yes, Revan. Thank you, Landon. Um, so he threw shade at Revan because, you know, Maven tweeted like, I can't believe I casted New York losing or dropping donuts, and Attach responded and said, well, when they knew what they were doing and we had no strats and no idea. And then of course Aches is like, I can't believe this. And he ats, Revan, and he's like, you didn't prepare them? And I'm like, oh, yikes. That's, I mean, but coaches matter in my opinion. And why, and I mean, that is a good question. Why didn't New York have any strats for the opening event where they were going to get 10 or 20 points and they knew they were playing one of the best S&D teams in the game?
Well,
That's
well, well. Just think about it. I mean, it's no secret that everybody kind of hides their S&D strats. But now, even after just one weekend, everybody's got all these VODs they can go back and watch. You can see exactly what certain teams have done on certain matches just by following the mini maps in the bottom left-hand corner. So even if you're not all that well prepared for the first event,
right.
now, I mean, a lot of what has happened is out there in the open. Like they can go, and it's just like any other sport, right? If you're talking football or basketball, everything's a copycat league. So if you're
Right.
going out and you're watching what Atlanta did in Search and Destroy, I mean, they went 12-0 on the weekend.
Right.
So if you're just going to tune in to their scrims and see what they did, you can easily pick up on, just from watching the mini map, where somebody went, where the decisive kills happen, stuff like that. So yeah,
But
I
I
don't know.
mean, but if you watch the campaign, the Huntsmen admitted, like on camera during the show, that they were talking about Dallas's strats because they admitted that Dallas was good. They were like, well, Dallas does this, and when Dallas plays this map, they go this way and they do that. Like like everybody did that in World War II when TK was somehow frying everybody at the beginning. It was like, well, what are they doing that we're not doing? So I agree with you, but I wonder why, if a team like Dallas that was kind of the arguable number one going into the event, um, if they are streaming all the time and you can, when you scrim them, you can, but because I would think New York scrimmed Dallas. I mean, I don't know, maybe they didn't, but you can't go in with no strats, like that just is kind of awkward to me, I guess.
Yeah, and some of these teams that have an academy team, that helps too. I mean,
That's true.
if you're
That's
getting
true.
really good scrims against teams that you have in house,
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of it is just how much have you played. It's just like any other strat. The more you play, the better sound your scrim your strategy gets. So,
that's a good point.
I don't know. Maybe that's something that Chicago could learn from. Pick up an academy team and then scrim them and stuff like S&D. Pick up these S&D stars, and then if you can develop that, if Chicago develops an S&D kind of similar to where the other top teams are, Atlanta,
Yeah.
Dallas, even though they got smacked. I mean, I already think Atlanta and Chicago are far above everybody else, but you develop that, now all of a sudden it's a different ball game.
Well, but here's the deal. And if it's true, and somebody in the chat earlier said, based on Clayster's tweets, that Atlanta and Dallas are at the same event only 4 out of the 12 events, which is crazy. Maybe Chicago, or no, I'm thinking, oh, is it Atlanta and Dallas or Chicago and Atlanta? I don't remember what the tweet was, but
Chicago, Atlanta.
so if Chicago and Atlanta are only at the same event 4 times, then maybe you don't need to learn because you'll just win all the ones they're not at. Like, I don't know. But you want to win champs, so you got to develop and get as good as you can. We're gonna
There's
take.
a
Go ahead.
there's a massive kind of rant from Aches right now on Twitter. It's kind of like this stuff going on that all my friends are texting me about.
Yeah.
But like coming up here, it says that Chicago and Atlanta won't ever be placed in the same group at any of 8 of 12 tournaments that they compete at. So it
Who
almost
said
feels
that?
like if Aches said that, Aches tweeted that. So if you're thinking about competitive integrity, basically what he's saying is that they're taking the two biggest brands and they're separating them on different sides of the bracket so that one of them or potentially both of them will make a finals, and then now think about the viewership that tournament would have. So yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of some interesting drama that's going on at the moment.
No, I'm looking at it. Dang. Patty P is Patty P, man. He's gonna be Patty
Yeah.
P. All right, we're gonna take another quick break, guys. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna get into some team by team and close out with power rankings and questions from you guys. So we'll be right back in a minute. So let me call out the oh, what's the good point? Aches does have a point. Yes, he does. Is what I said once the new format was announced. Seeing for groups can't be handpicked. Yeah, see, and that's unfortunate, Lando. And I'll say that one of the other unfortunate aspects is in Slack. I was watching his stream this morning. He was talking about all of this, and he just said, um, how do you call yourself number one if the best team isn't, if every team isn't at every event? You can't really call yourself number one. I do want to call out the follows real quick that I haven't called out because I've got a million and I want to make sure I recognize you guys. Okay. Senville, Proper, Men's, Matt, uh, I,
Oh, yeah.
Matthias, Villas, Fast Baller, Creative on the Sticks, Alon, Galicia, Shelbs, Ball Mike, Lau, Sip Mucus, I don't know how to say that, Infinite, and Tim Zyme. Thank you guys all for the follows. And you can subscribe, you can donate, you can subscribe to my YouTube down below. If I get this off the screen, you guys can also hit up my dude Icon, the guy that you guys hear talking. He's amazing, makes great YouTube videos, breaks down gameplay very, very well. He'll probably be casting eventually if he wants to not teach middle school. um,
One thing I'll say real quick before
yeah,
we
go
move
ahead.
on, just to Landon's point over there, is that even though those teams like won't be playing initially, it does seem like if we look at the setup for this London event that's coming, I mean, we talked about it a little bit ago, but all of those major teams are on one side of the bracket. So
Which is weird.
I
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you obviously it in a way it does seem like it's handpicked, but in a way it doesn't. Like this one, obviously, if anybody's going for some sort of like viewership favorship, you wouldn't put those four teams on the same side of the bracket.
Not
You
at
would have
all.
them spread
No.
out.
You're not
So
putting
I mean,
Aches and Crim and Scump and all them on the same. Yeah, no, you wouldn't do that.
right. So did this, so with Atlanta and Chicago being on opposite sides of the bracket, is that by chance or what's happening? The picture that you have up on screen right now kind of shows that it's kind of some evidence against what he's saying. So I don't know, who knows, but we're
It's
going to move on.
no, bro. It is it's there's not a lot of clarity around it, around what we're doing and why they're doing it. And I guess Landon says this bracket has changed different times is my worry. And maybe it'll change again, Landon, because when they recognize like, hey, if you guys want viewers on day two, you might not want to make the possibility of there being no Aches, who of course is going to be some people are going to want to watch because he's a villain and he's already made that obvious. You might want to make sure there's not going to be no Karma or maybe no Scump and his team, or maybe No Crim and his team. Like, you don't want to put all of them on the same side of the bracket. That just seems awkward to me.
Well,
But maybe they want to
stuff,
make sure that London makes it through. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. Stuff like this has been solved in traditional sports forever. All you have to do is just come out with the power rankings, seed everybody through rank, and then, one will play 8 and 2 will play 7, and the way that traditional
but
sports has done it forever.
you have to admit, power rankings right now is very tough.
Well,
for us, because we have the middle of the bracket, like top 3 and bottom 3, maybe is easy, but the rest of the bracket, or the rest of the teams, like fitting the other, the other 6 teams, they could literally go back and forth and all around. And I think, speaking to the power rankings, I kind of got a little frustrated about how much the power rankings were being referred to on stream.
Agreed.
And by players. I was just like, and I sent a personal message in my little video towards Paris, because I was like, what did you expect? Like, honestly, if I hadn't seen you play, and I'm comparing based off of just like championships and people that I know and people that I've seen, and I happen to put you at the bottom, I'm putting you number 12th in the world. Not number, like, I know it sucks. Like, who would want to be rated 12th, right? But, and then you beat Optic and you're like, yeah, that's right, you guys were wrong. And I'm like, I mean, a lot of, like, Simp said on the podcast that Optic was the worst team he scrimmed. Like, so I think that the power rankings were getting taken way too seriously. And what you do when you do that is you create an environment where someone like Nameless is never going to do power rankings again. Like, why would you ever want to be the person that announces the power rankings?
You're not taking that heat anymore.
Heck no. You get pro players throwing shots at you from the stage, getting mad and seeming literally frustrated that you put them 12th. And I'm like, well, if it makes any sense, I put you 12th out of millions of Call of Duty players on the planet. Like, your team is the 12th ranked team in the world. I'm sorry that you're 12th.
Well, I think a lot of this could have been solved if this, I know that this launch weekend was just kind of to kick off everything, but had this launch weekend been a big double elimination tournament, a lot of this could have been solved and a lot of this could have been figured out. So now, going into London next weekend, even though a lot of the teams aren't there, you could have placed them in a it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be a scenario in which you're pretty comfortable with.
If this was a double elimination bracket, Dallas would never play the 2 teams they played in a row.
Exactly.
They would have lost to Chicago and played some other team, and they would have went on a losers run and then maybe played Faze in the winners or losers finals. Like, there's no way that it would have turned out the way it turned out. Faze would have been waiting in the grand finals for Chicago or Dallas, probably. Like, and you didn't, there wasn't, and with the new patch, you didn't get enough games in to warm up. Yes, I know everybody scrimmed. I know everyone had to play on the patch. However, I do think that Dallas probably was hit really hard. I think Illy and Shotzi were struck pretty hard by the patch. So I forgot where we were going next. We got off topic. Okay, so we're going to go team by team. I'm going to put the standings up on the screen for you guys. Hold up. Give me 1 second, guys. Standings. Okay, there we go. All right. So we're going to go team by team, and then we're going to attempt. I'm scared of this because I was trying to do this earlier and I couldn't, but you guys in the chat need to help us because we're going to go team by team, starting at the bottom. And we're just going to briefly just cover, we'll make it quick. We're going to talk about kind of standout player that fell short if someone did, what to work on, and I'm going to let Icon kind of run that part because, when it comes to the gameplay and in-game stuff, he's way more knowledgeable than I am. And then if they had a surprise loss or victory as a team. And what we'll do, Icon, to make this kind of go quick, if either one of us wants to throw in for both, we can. Rodney, yes, the Huntsmen can beat Faze. Anybody in this league can beat Faze, but is it going to happen? They'd have to have a bad day. And I haven't seen Simp have a bad day in the
forever.
last 5 times I've seen him play, I guess. Even when they got second, whatever the event was before playoffs, I don't remember what it was, but or third or whatever they got, he was still frying. So what we can do is we can just switch off teams, and then we can throw in comments if we want. I'm sure it'll take longer than I'm saying anyway.
Yeah.
But
So
also, go ahead.
So yeah, let's just start at the bottom here. Let's talk about New York. Now, again, all of this kind of has like a counterpoint to it because New York was pretty bad, right? I mean, they were probably if you're looking at just KD wise and how they performed, I mean, SND KD's 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.4, 0.9. And so
Yikes.
if you're
Who had a
talking
point
about
two?
like that would be accuracy.
Oh no.
But
Okay,
if
go
you're
ahead.
talking about like things they did well, things they did bad, players to point out, I thought Zuma played pretty well. If you're looking at like just some respawn stuff, Zuma had the highest KD for their team. In fact, he was the only one that was kind of positive throughout the day. So if you're looking at positives, then probably Zuma is the one that stood out for me. But they also had what might be the most impressive map win of the weekend. That domination win against Atlanta, I can't think of a single map that was more impressive than that performance that they had there. So map count 1 and 6, everybody played pretty terrible for New York, but again, it's not big enough for of a sample size to really talk about in terms of power rankings. Now, if we are talking power rankings, I mean, they're also last on mine just because of the performance that they put forward. But if you're just talking about New York as a whole, Zuma would probably be a little bit of a bright spot, but I think that they'll get better. I've watched them scrim, I don't know, probably 50 different matches, and it's very seldom that you actually see them perform like this. So I do think that they'll get better. But Zuma was probably a standout, and they definitely have to work on their S&D because the S&D KDs were terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on from there, if we're talking about Dallas, Crim6 was for the weekend, he was their best player.
Yep.
In Hardpoint, he was the only one that had a KD above 1. In SND, he had a 1.22. And think about it. If going into this weekend, you had to say who's going to have the best weekend, you're probably not going to say Crim.
No.
Right? You're probably going to pick one of those other 4 players if we're being honest. But again, if you're just lining this up, how much weight do you actually put into this? I don't know, because they played the 2 best teams. So
Yes.
that's why I know we've been back to this so much, but I just wish it would have been a tournament because if they get knocked by Chicago, I want to see them play London or I want to see them play Toronto or even Seattle, somebody like that. Because I think that their SND is so good, even though they didn't really show it this weekend, except for that match against Chicago. That SND against Chicago, they were by far the dominant team in that SND.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about good players, bad players, Crim was the best. And then Illy and Shotzi, I mean, I think it might have just been a little bit of nerves and whatnot playing in, but Shotzi was definitely their worst. And if they want to have any sort of success moving forward, Shotzi has to play better.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those two teams?
So Redneck, and this is where name me a team that would have done better. Like like people that are saying they played the 2 best teams poorly. I think they played not to their strengths in general. Like whoever they played, I don't think Dallas played as good as they could have played. The hard point against FaZe was close. It went down to the final hard point where there was a random spawn, like most of the games that we watched this weekend, and 2 FaZe players spawned in the back of the cave. Priesta jumped on the hard point, held it down, and it was over. I think it was like 230 something to 250, and yeah, they got smoked in the S&D, but who didn't by FaZe? Like and who wouldn't have? Who would FaZe not have embarrassed like that? Honestly, yeah, like
maybe Chicago, but
maybe. But we're saying maybe to that because we didn't expect them to do what they did to Dallas. Dallas beat Chicago, right? So I think
and the problem is we don't know. There's no
we
way
have
of
no
telling.
idea. We don't. They didn't play enough matches to tell us anything. The Dom was close in the first half, and then FaZe took over the second half. I really think that we have not seen the best of Dallas. I think that the younger guys were too impacted maybe by the change at the last minute. They had practiced and they were the best team on the old patch. And yes, everybody played on the new patch, but on the old patch that was days before, they were the best team. So I honestly right now don't know like what I think they will get better. I just really don't see that team staying at this point. If this was a tournament like you said, I can name 5 teams that I'm looking at that I would definitely say they would beat. And
Yeah, probably.
they're better in search than Seattle, who couldn't win a search. They would have beat them. I think they would beat Optic. I think they would beat Toronto, even though Toronto was good in search, and that's what helped them win one of their matches. I think they would beat the Gorillas. I mean, look at as we go up. I think they would beat the Ravens. I almost think they would beat everyone except for Chicago and FaZe, and maybe Paris could come out with a miracle because what they did this weekend was just really good, and I can't throw shade at them for actually, you know, convincing me that they did better. I would say work on as a team. They know what they need to work on. Playing on the new patch and just changing their strategies because they had strategies set up for the way they'd been playing online and the way they've been playing against everyone, and it just didn't work. Watching the way FaZe played them, and um, there was no surprise loss. I knew they were going to lose, so I can't. Yeah. So for me, Dallas actually ended up where I thought they were going to. Did I think they were going to go 1-6 in maps? No, not at all. I thought they'd be more like 3-6 or 4-6, but um, I thought they were going to lose both of their matches. So I wasn't
Yep,
surprised.
agreed. If we're if we're moving up here, we can talk about OGLA next. I was shocked, honestly. I expected them to lose to Chicago, but that result to Paris, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have I wouldn't have guessed that would have happened. There's just so many names and there's so much talent still on that OGLA roster. I know I was a little shocked by that. If we're just talking about like the maps in specific, the maps were fairly close, right? So they lost the first hard point to Paris by like 15. They lost the domination to Paris by like 20. And
Hmm.
then the search and destroy, they kind of got blown out. It was like a 6-3. But still, it just seems like a rotation here, a rotation there, a couple clutch kills here and there, and OGLA easily could have been at least 1-1. The maps against Chicago weren't very impressive at all. Especially, I think that first hard point they lost by like 80. So if you're talking about just Optic, Kenny and Dashy played really well, and TJ and JCap were pretty bad. So if you're talking
And
like,
okay, so that's what I was waiting for you to say.
what's that?
They had some players that fell short. Optic just had in this game, you have to help where your teammates, I mean, I guess in every COD, but you have to help where your teammates leave gaps. And I felt like Dashy had to do that a lot. TJ had to get 3 pieces just to keep the game alive sometimes. Like you and these guys are used to playing with players that they can rely on, and that's the biggest, I will tell you, the biggest bonus that FaZe has over everyone else. They trust each other because their individual talent is ridiculous. Any of them can be number one on the map. Any of them.
Well,
Major,
well,
Priesta, Abizi, like any of them. Celium, people think he's the best in the game. Like any of those players could, and so when they go to their position, you're like, oh, you got it. I don't even have to. No, and even if you die, I'm gonna stay where I'm supposed to be. What I saw from Optic was rotations that may not have been necessary, um, but because, like you said, there was times where JCap just wasn't holding up, and um, yeah, it was tough.
well, look, I've broken down. I've watched probably 90 or 100 different matches with Atlanta FaZe. I watch them all the time.
Hmm.
And like you were saying, if there's an important rotation in hardpoint and you see, a red arrow and somebody else going for like a clutch kill that's going to determine spawns and whatnot, they just come up with those kills. They just clutch it up and then they get rotations and then now they're going to win that map. Whereas TJ, had a point 0.7, JCap had a point 0.7. I mean, they're just, when it comes down to you're the person that's rotating and you have to finish that kill and you don't do it, I mean, that's why you are where you are. Whereas if you're looking at Paris, almost everybody's KD was above 1.0, their respawn KDs. So in that matchup that those two teams had, one team is just slaying a lot more than the other one. There
How
were
much?
3 or 4 people on Paris that had a KD above the best person from OGLA.
But in terms of stats, when you have 5 players on the map and there is grunt work, you're gonna get a grenade thrown at you, but we need you to jump on the hill, and try to get a trophy down, stuff like that. Um, how much of some negative stats, I'll say, because TP used to have really low stats when he played with, Crim and Karma and Aches, but he was definitely, they needed him. He was needed on the team. Um, how much would you say some of the low stats are a reflection of some of the other low stats, if that makes sense? Like maybe somebody's stats are lower because they are trying to make up for their teammates and they're not in the position where they need to be. I guess that's what I'm asking is that an accurate assessment of some of these matches, or is it just they were getting outgunned?
Well, first of all, you brought up TP, and TP did like a lot of that grunt work around the hill, but TP is also a phenomenal in-game leader.
That's
So
true.
even though
Yeah.
his stats might not have been that great, he's the one that's calling the shots and he's picking up on what other teams are doing and stuff like that. So TP, even though his stats might be so now compare, the typical TP from years past
Hmm.
and compare kind of what TJ gives you. Now last year TJ had some incredible matches when he was playing last year in Black Ops 4.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about comparing those two and like doing the grunt work and being the SMGs around the hill and stuff like that, you don't know if you get necessarily the leadership from TJ or from Dashy or,
Hmm.
I mean, who's the leader on OGLA?
It's got to be Slasher,
Who?
right?
Yeah, it has to be because that's not JCap. That's not who JCap is.
No.
That's not who Kenny is. Kenny's kind of quiet. Dash, they're all kind of just like quiet, go about their business type of dudes. So it has to be Slasher. And if Slasher has a 0.8 KD for the weekend, you know what I mean? It's
That's
just
not
like
a Slasher stat. Yeah.
like where do you find like you have to find that somewhere. Now again, it's early. We haven't seen a tournament with all these people or anything, but I don't know. We'll see. So stats. So back to your original point.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Stats for SMGs. They're not all that important. I guess if you're like, especially if you're like the bomb carrier in S&D, right? If you're the bomb carrier, then you're going to be putting yourself in precarious situations and whatnot. But you usually want to have something that goes along with that, such as like a karma. So if you can do that brunt work around the hill like karma, and you can hold a 1.0 or a 1.1 in respawn game types, then now all of a sudden, you're not frying, you're not holding down a 1.5 like Simp's doing, but
Right.
you're killing more than you're dying. You're providing some valuable stuff to your teammates. So
Karma to me played like Black Ops 2 Killa in this event. And what I mean by saying that is that he got almost 70 interactions in some of the hard points and was positive, but barely. It's like 38 and 36. And so I as a teammate, I'd be like, thank you. Like when you can get that many interactions and go positive, great. We don't want you to get that many interactions if you're going to be like 25 and 47, but if you can get that many interactions and be a little positive, of course I'm going to make Black Ops 2 references, Bird, I did want to say something to Sart, however you say your name, dude, before we go to the Surge. Dang, they called him J-Crap. That's horrible. JCap is a vocal player. He's going to be vocal in scrims. He's going to be vocal when watching film. JCap has always been I am not afraid to speak my mind to any personality you put me with. You put me on Optic with Scump and Nadeshot, I will tell them what needs to be heard. I don't care if it's like JCap since way back in the Optic days. He was a player who was not afraid to speak his opinion, and he would say it in a way where almost not in a parasite type of way or an aches type of way where he kind of made you feel stupid sometimes, but in a way where he just was like, I'm right. So listen to me. I know what I'm doing. And when CTF is a game mode, he knows how to play that game. It's not this year. But that's why he's in the league. He's in the league. Aches is in the league. Clayster's in the league. because they're proven champions. JCap has 2 rings. Like, why would you not want that person on your team? There's some kind of something he's got that is going to add to your team. That's the hope, you know. And so, and I know I said this to you earlier, Icon, and I know people don't agree with it. He probably might make a good coach, Redneck, maybe. But look at the last. I I mean, I don't know which champs there wasn't an experienced person on the team where someone that didn't win a championship, except for maybe the first one with Farico. But Karma, ever since that one, I think we've always had a champs with someone that's already won a champs, winning champs. I think. I'm just saying that. Um, and that's when it matters. Like you guys were talking about apathy. He gets better. Apathy plays his best at champs. When there's that much money on the line, some of these guys just like a J Cap who went 2 in a row. They just turn up. And if you're recruiting, you're kind of like, well, it's just like NBA teams. They recruit people that are not. Vince Carter is not, one of the best players in the league, but he's a GOAT. So why not have him? There's some championship pedigree, even though he doesn't have one, that he has. There's something that Vince Carter has that they want on the team to teach the young guys. And so that would be my opinion on why you pick up JCap. That's just, is Vince Carter in the dunk contest this year? That would be great, dude. Brack is on a team. He just didn't get played. He was on Toronto. He just, for some reason, and I think Landon, if he's still in the chat, one of the things he said is, I think it was Landon that said he was surprised that he was not starting. All right, we can move on. Sorry.
All good. So if we're moving on, I don't know how much we want to touch on Seattle and Toronto because we hit them really hard when we were talking about.
We can move past them. I'll just say I'm proud of Karma. I'm proud of Methods. I can't really point out who fell short. S&D was just a problem for Seattle. I felt like they were well received by the crowd. I was happy for them. Thank you, Bird, for the sub. Welcome to the kingdom. Appreciate you, man. I just felt like I felt like they're going to get better. And Toronto, meme team, and they're accepting that they're the meme team, and I love it. That's all I'll say about those 2 teams.
Yeah. Enable for Seattle has to be better. I think he had like a 0.5 S&D KD. So for a team that was 0-4 for the weekend in S&D, and if Enable has a point, like a 0.4, 0.5, somewhere in there, I mean, he has to be better. The rest of the team, was pretty decent. Karma played well. Octane played really well. Octane was by far their best player over the weekend.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've touched on Seattle a lot. We touched on Toronto a lot. Toronto, the good thing, just to recap anybody that might not have been here earlier, for Toronto, they were one of the best S&D teams there, and they were one of the worst respawn teams. So S&D strats can come about when you have basically essentially an academy team, right? You have 5 starters and 5 people on the bench. So for Toronto, that map count that you're looking at on the right, 3-0 is from search and destroy, and then 1-5 is from respawn game types. So
yeah.
If you're Toronto, Methods was tremendous. Methods was great. And everybody else, 0.9, 0.8, 0.8, somewhere around there. So he needs a little bit of help in terms of in the slaying department from Toronto. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like LA, so I feel like the Gorillas and Toronto are basically kind of the same team at this point in time. Essentially, Gorillas were 3-0 in S&D, even though they had to forfeit that. So they were really 2-1. They had to forfeit that match against Rocker. But essentially, they're basically the same. They really slayed. They did really well in terms of their. Are you
talking about the Gorillas right now?
Yeah, talking about Gorillas.
I was in the chat. Go ahead.
No good, no problem. But yeah, Gorillas, I mean, they're essentially the same thing as Toronto. They played really well in search, and then they didn't perform very well in respawns. So
can I add my 2 cents?
Yeah, of course.
So
yeah, of course.
Thank you, Bird, for the subscription. I didn't mean to overshadow it, but I was in the middle of talking. I appreciate it. I have a whole bunch of new emotes coming, guys, because since I passed 20 subscribers, I get 6 now or something like that. And I have someone, I already paid them. They're designing brand new emotes for me. You guys will see those soon. Also, let Icon know if you would like to see this more often. I'm trying to convince him to do this once a week, but he's a busy man. I was proud of the Gorillas. I heard them getting trashed by everybody on every podcast. And if Paris didn't exist, everybody would have seen them as being last. They were 11th or 12th. Now they're a team that I definitely would have told people like, excuse me, 11th? We almost beat the team that you had fourth because they almost beat Minnesota. They kind of should have, but you're not going to win after you get a map taken away from you. That's just, I mean, you have to have, yeah, I don't, maybe Faze could do that, but for that team, that probably was demoralizing. But to go to play as well as they did in the first two maps against Minnesota, um, and I just thought they were a good team. I thought they did a lot better than anyone expected. I remember after the first map when they won and Apes was standing up talking about stop talking. Somebody tweeted, one of the pro players tweeted, Aches is going to love this game. Like that was what they tweeted immediately.
I
And
can see it.
so yeah, I was I don't know. Yes, I agree with you what you said before the show that Aches was definitely, not their best player and had low stats and but I asked the same question I would about JCap, but even in a bigger way, because Aches has taken down some of the best teams in our sport when he never should have in Optic over and over and over at Champs. And he won Champs 2 years ago when there was better teams. Like there's something about that guy, and it's delusional confidence, in my opinion, that he exudes. It doesn't matter how much he loses or how low his stats are. He honestly believes that he can beat anyone. And I guarantee you this year there will be an upset and the Gorillas will beat one of the top three teams in this game. I'm just throwing that out there. It'll happen. And we'll all
Yeah,
be surprised when it does.
If we're talking about like performance over the weekend, they played really well in search. Aches himself had probably some of the worst stats there, but his team was so good at search, and that's where you're wondering, is Aches kind of providing the same thing that a Gunless provides, even though he's probably a little bit more cynical and a little bit more vocal than Gunless
Right.
is. Gunless, even though he can, be a little harsh on his teammates, but I think so we were just talking about JCap. I think Aches provides that role way better than JCap does.
Definitely. I agree.
So, and I think one of the best wins from the weekend was their win over Florida. I thought Florida was going to be, I don't know, 5th or 6th somewhere, just because they play so fast and they're just so good from what I've seen in scrims. So I think that Gorilla win over Florida, that was a big one.
That was a big one. Florida, if they would have won, if they would have beat the Gorillas convincingly, we would be talking about them being the 4th or 5th best team in the game.
Yeah, for sure. They would probably, I can't imagine them and Minnesota would probably be right in the same discussion, right at the same level.
Yep. Agreed.
So, Aches, we've been talking about Gorillas. London, I was disappointed, if I'm being honest. I thought London was going to be similar to Minnesota. I just expected them to, I don't know, just kind of have the same outcomes at this tournament. So with London, if we're talking about just specifically, they looked extremely phenomenal against New York, and they looked extremely subpar against Paris.
Absolutely.
Right?
Which makes no sense.
Think about the maps. Against New York, they won the hard point by 100. They won the S&D 6-2, and they won the domination by basically 100.
They looked like goats. They looked like they were like a team that we way under. They were undersold. They were underpredicted. They looked amazing.
Yeah, they were so good. And watching Scraps and Wuskin during that S&D on that first. I mean, they looked like they could easily be in that 4 spot along with Minnesota. So, I don't know. They had.
Guy from Boston, Pat, thank you for the sub. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Thank you for the
sub.
No,
you're good. But yeah, they had really high highs and really low lows. So I don't know. We'll see where London's at. I can't wait to watch that homestead that they have. I think the crowd is going to be awesome. I think the environment, I can't wait for that. But in terms of their performance, I don't know. It's kind of all over the place. I expected them to be really good. They showed that a little bit. I think Jerd had a little bit of a rough day. If we're talking about just overall KDs, he was probably the lowest performing on their team. Jerd and Rated and S&D were like 0.5, 0.6.
Yeah, Jerd was getting smashed on Saturday.
Then Scraps and Wuskin in Search and Destroy were 1.5, 1.6. I mean, they were phenomenal. So who knows? But I think that as we move forward here, I wouldn't be surprised if they came out of that Group B when it went to London. The only team over there that I think is really going to challenge them is what we've seen from Paris. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think anybody can win that right side of the bracket as it goes out to London.
It's gonna be. I think the first two matches are where you're really gonna. New York has to win, in my opinion. They have to win their first match. If New York gets double, basically, if they lose 2 games in a row and they're out of London, people are going to start talking about they need to make a roster change, like because that's below expectations for this team and for this roster.
Yeah.
And I know.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
if you're just taking the overall performances from those 4 teams that are on the right side of that bracket, I mean, who can you legitimately say right now New York is going to beat?
You can't, because New York underperformed at this event.
Even Toronto, who was 1-5 in respawn game types, were phenomenal in search and destroy.
Yeah, they didn't lose.
So if they can take 1 respawn and then win those searches, I mean, on that right side, I don't see who New York beats.
That's tough,
I don't know,
bro. But at least they're on the right side. Because if they were on the left side,
yeah.
I mean,
but yeah, imagine switching New York and the Gorillas. If you put Gorillas on the other side, now I think LA probably wins that right half of the bracket.
And if you put Gorillas on that side, I mean, those would be some good matches, man.
It would be
just all around that side of the bracket. I'm excited about the left side, but Chicago and Dallas, especially for the teams they're playing, they just look like the clear winners going into the upper half of the bracket. One of them is for sure going through. So, which I guess is what we want. I would say the same things about the Ravens. I actually don't have much to say. I was very, very, very pleased with their performance on Friday. I was impressed. I was shocked. I'm sorry for New York that they literally got humdingered twice. Like, they just got punched in the mouth and then punched in the stomach. And it wasn't by Faze in Chicago like Dallas did, where it's like, I mean, they're the best teams in the game. You know, what'd you expect, bro? But I didn't see New York losing both of those matches. Like, I of course saw them losing to Faze, but I said, oh, they could probably pick up a map, which they did. So good job, New York. Because like you said, that was probably one of the most impressive turnarounds of the event, you know. And I think Zuma's will just went crazy. He was like, nah, man, I'm not going home 0-6. It's just not happening. I'm not being the you know. And but there's nothing he could do after that. It was his team just couldn't keep up, and they'll get better. They'll get better, and I think they will get better. The Ravens just versus Paris. I wanted to see a grudge match. I wanted to see the type of long matches. I wanted to see 5 games, and like some of the best matches of this weekend went to Game 5. There's something about getting to watch another search that just excites me in this game specifically.
Which is a perfect segue for Florida, the next team on these power rankings. Florida, going into this weekend, I could not wait to watch them play because they're so fast and they're so aggressive and they play so well.
Right.
But yeah, they were probably the only, I think they were the only team that took both of their matches to that Game 5, that search and destroy. And one of them they clutched up on. They beat Seattle 6-0. I mean, it wasn't really even a competition. But then against LA, against the Gorillas, they lost in like a 4-6 fashion, I believe. But if we're talking about Florida, I just love watching them play. If we're talking about stats, what Pristini gives you, we touched on this, I think, a little bit earlier. Everybody was above 1 in S&D, but what Pristini gives you in Search and Destroy, he's just one of those really special players that you can get so much from. Like, he's only 1 out of 5 on the roster, but even him playing so aggressive, he's always just sprinting down lanes in Search and Destroy. He has no fear whatsoever, and that is so much fun to watch. Like, if you're watching that and that's being podcasted, that's like, those are matches that I just can't take my eyes off of. It's just so good. In Hardpoint, Mox and Skies were phenomenal. They both had like a 1.2, 1.3, somewhere in there. So they were fantastic. But if you're talking about how they played, everything was just kind of average. They won 3 respawns, they lost 3 respawns. They won 2 search, they lost 2 search. So they're one of the only teams where, like, you know, what do you really get from them? I expected them to be in the But going into this, I thought there was the top 3 and then next 3 after them. I thought Florida was in there, and that's where they're at the moment. But I don't feel super confident with them like how I do some of these other teams.
What I know from um sorry, I was looking at Twitter. What I know from Florida is I'm gonna get their best. Um, and that's what I appreciated this weekend is that Florida they gave me entertaining matches. Like you said, I mean, they were fun. They're a fun team to watch, and Pristini's in his element, man. He is just out there dancing around, doing moves. You know, there's a gif with him dancing around. Like I really like this team.
I do too.
And I'm excited for their homestead. I'm excited for their kind of back and forth with Seattle. I think that'll be good, like the two, C teams or whatever.
Yeah. Battle of the Tides.
Yeah, but to go 5 maps in both matches, I love it. That's what I want to see. Like teams that were 6-1, 1-6, 6-2. I'm like, it was okay to watch. But the Mutineers, agreed. I loved their matches because it was just like, ooh, who's gonna? Oh, it's last, and it was just like I'm glued to the screen. Now on day one, I'll be honest, and you guys were talking about domination in the chat, and I told Icon this earlier. I was staring at the ABC at the top of the screen. I couldn't look at it. I didn't know what was going on by watching the players. They were behind, so somebody would get a 3-piece and then it'd be too late when they switched to them. I couldn't tell what flag they were capping by just watching, or where they were going or why they were going there or what players were dying so fast. It was just like, huh? And so I just watched the top of the screen and I literally couldn't tell which was I couldn't tell like which team was doing what, so I just watched ABC, 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 ABC. And Florida though, entertaining team, and I was really happy. We got like 20 more minutes, so we got to get to these other teams.
No problem. So as we move up here, Paris we talked a lot about earlier. So Paris, I thought, was one of the most impressive teams there. I think with where they started, nobody knew anything about them. Everybody expected them to be 12 out of 12. They probably had, honestly, if we're talking about the most impressive performance, I don't know if there's any teams that were really more impressive than what Paris did.
No.
So Paris, they deserve to be there. I'm excited to see them in London and see if they can continue that or if it was just kind of a fluke. As we move up, Minnesota, I thought Minnesota was phenomenal. What's holding Minnesota back is that in respawns, they were really good. They were 5-1 on the weekend in respawns. But even though it says they were 1-1, so 1-1 in S&D, one of those was the forfeit. So they were really 0-2 in S&D if you're talking about just thinking about it literally.
Yeah.
So they have to improve a little bit there in terms of their S&D strats. But can we just talk? I mean, GodRx is incredible. Watching him in respawns, in fact, I've watched a ton of, they always seem to be scrimming, and those two teams are scrimming. It's just Formal complaining about how he cannot kill GodRx like over and over again.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's fantastic. Assault is really good. Asim is super good online. But he didn't have the best tournament. I think he was sub-1 in terms of KD. But Minnesota, I think that they're clearly in that upper echelon. I think Atlanta, Chicago, Minnesota. Then honestly, I would still put. I mean, we'll get to our power rankings, but
okay.
So Minnesota.
Yeah, I would say for Minnesota, Paris. Yes, they did great. A lot better than what I thought. Minnesota. Again, just another fun team to watch. That whole first, the game against the Gorillas just, it just didn't turn out well because of the forfeit. I really wish we would have seen a replay or something. It's unfortunate, and what it created and the beef and what it created storylines for Aches, and anytime they play Minnesota, it's going to be some craziness. But yeah, anyway, I thought they did. They showed up. Everybody said they were a top 4 team, and they came out of this third.
As we move on, Chicago at number 2. That's probably where they deserve to be. I thought they were fantastic. Formal and Arcides, that match against Dallas, Arcides probably had, I don't know, it's hard to say he had one of the best performances of the weekend just because when you look at what Atlanta did, I mean, who's going to, but
Exactly.
Arcides and Formal were fantastic. Envoy, I do think that the key, if I had to say, what's the key to this entire league, I think it's Envoy. I really think whatever he does will determine. So Envoy is just such a stud, and he was so good last year in Black Ops 4. But over the weekend, he was the only one on Chicago that had a sub-1 KD. Really didn't play all that well in Search and Destroy.
Yeah.
His hardpoint KD, they need him to have like a 1-1, 1-2, somewhere in there. And he was sub-1. So if you're talking about like good parts and bad parts and whatnot, Envoy really does. If he starts playing, if he has a KD like Arcides has, I mean, those matchups with Atlanta are going to be insane. But if we're talking good and bad, Arcides was phenomenal, even though he was kind of bad in S&D. And if we're talking about S&D, Scump was phenomenal. Scump had one of the highest S&D KDs that there was. So if we're just talking about Chicago, Scump was great. Formal was good because, and then the rest of the S&Ds there for Chicago weren't really all that well, which is why they got absolutely smacked by Dallas in that. But yeah, if we're just talking about Chicago, I'd like to see Envoy play a little bit better. But yeah, look at that Search and Destroy KD from Scump that you have on screen right now. I mean, it's just, it's phenomenal.
So again, Scump has something to prove. Will matters. Skill and will matter. The most skilled team in the league is undeniably Faze. Not even a question. Sorry for all the Huntsmen fans, but right now I haven't seen anything like what these guys are doing. I think they have a Scump on their team. When Scump came into our esport in 2011, playing against Optic Gaming and won his first event with Aches and TP, and I think it was Bobby. We had never everybody was like, who's this redheaded kid? And then I think he won another tournament before switching teams over to Optic. But Scump has something to prove, and to drop a 3.6 versus Optic Gaming, that's personal. I want to see what Scump does when he plays against. I want to see what this whole team does when they play against Faze. I really want to see that. I want to see a non. I mean, they basically created a spectacle by making the Huntsmen play Optic and Dallas. Like, what they created a spectacle. Like, it was, of course, these were going to be some of the most watched matches of the weekend.
Right.
And Scump went off and he did his best and he fried and his team fried and he gassed him up and he went crazy and he got excited and he stood up and him and Formal were excited and happy. And he said in an interview, I can't wait to walk across the stage, look Tej in the face and say GG's. And he did from a 3-0.
That emotion from Scump at the end of that Dallas match was something else.
Yeah, he is a GOAT. I call him the most valuable player in our esport, not because he is the best, but because he is the most valuable. If Scump stops playing Call of Duty, we will see. The only reason we didn't see a downtick when Nadeshot stopped playing is because Scump kept playing. And when Scump stops playing, we won't see a downtick, probably because Simp and Envoy and people like that will keep playing. But Scump is one of the most valuable assets that our league has. The most valuable owner is Hex. The most valuable player is probably Scump.
But at the moment, those younger players don't have the personalities that a Scump and a Formal and those guys have.
They have the skills.
So,
but not
that's the thing. When Nadeshot left, you still had a phenomenal personality there with Scump. The skill is there with some of those young guns from Atlanta and Envoy and stuff like that. But do you have all the intangibles that make Scump who he is?
Not yet. And he's a unique breed. But I do think as Simp becomes his meteoric rise this year, when he becomes one of the most well-known people in our esport just by winning and being, I mean, when you beat people the way that Faze beat people, people are going to watch that over and over and over and over and over and over and replay. Like what he did last year when he stood up after those snipes, the 3-piece that he got, and he stood up and and everybody just looked at this and people were just like, I mean, Clayster, his whole team was just like, Now, I'll say this for what it's worth. I hope I understand the animosity between Scump and Formal and these two teams, and so I expected them to do what they did. I did not expect Arcides to sound as I didn't expect him to sound as egotistical, I guess, or arrogant, I guess. I didn't expect that from Arcides. And the Twins, I've always thought of them as like,
Oh
we love
yeah.
winning. And what's up, Carnitas? And we're just happy to win and we're happy to get to play the game. I felt like a different Arcides came out, and I feel like some of what Seth and Matt bring to the table is going to Arcides. But these guys have had this conversation. Our egos got so big, and then when we started losing, and I'm like, be careful. Please be careful, Huntsman, that your egos don't get big again. And then when you lose, even though you're the most followed, most entertaining team on the planet, it doesn't matter to someone like Scump, who is a winner. He wants to win. And when they start losing, if their egos are way up here, there's going to be a deflating, and I just don't want to see that from them. I don't see egos from Faze. I saw a little bit towards Dallas. Everybody's throwing shade at Dallas this weekend. It was really unfortunate, but I get it. Everybody says they talk mess online, but anyway, we can move to
Yeah,
the next team.
I think when you see the clips from Arcides like in that campaign series, he seems so genuine and such a nice guy.
Yeah.
It just seemed like the stuff from him was a little bit forced in that post game presser. I don't know if he was to ever watch this or see this. I just keep it real, man. You seem like such a nice person and such a genuine person. Just stick with that.
Yeah, if I feel like him and Preston still playing together would be great. It was a storyline that I liked, But
yeah,
So
So
as you
we
start
move
with
on,
Faze, I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick as you start with Faze.
all right.
You can go ahead and
So
start.
as we go ahead, we talk about Faze real quick. If we were to go through this, I mean, there's only so much that you can really say, right? So in terms of Faze, the S&D KDs are insanity. I mean, I'm not sure that you will ever see somebody the rest of this, especially in like a tournament style mode. I'm not sure if we'll ever see somebody the rest of the year have a 6.5, a 14, a 5 S&D KD. So if we're just talking about search and destroy, I think that's where they shine, especially since think about the very first matchup. Think about Chicago and Dallas. That matchup that they had, that second match, that search and destroy. I mean, it looked like Dallas was playing like an AM team, the way that they ran through Chicago on that search and destroy. And then you fast forward a couple days, and now Dallas plays Atlanta. And if you're talking about their S&D, it looked the exact opposite, right? So in terms of that, they ended up losing that the 6-0. Atlanta didn't lose a single round of search and destroy. None of them were even really contested. It was as dominant of a search and destroy as you could have. And then if we're talking about respawns, the one thing that I'll say in terms of if we're just talking about their respawns, I can't tell you how many of these respawns I've broken down of Atlanta Faze, but it seems like every time you turn around, there's somebody dropping 45, and a lot of times it's Abizi, and that didn't happen here. So Abizi he was the one person that his overall KD was a 0.99, his respawn was a 0.8. So if we're talking about Abizi, somebody that regularly throws up 45 when you're playing scrims. So just think about that. As dominant as Atlanta was, what might be their second best player had a very marginal respawn, or a very marginal tournament this weekend. So I don't know. Search and destroys, they were fantastic. I don't see how anybody beats them. They're just so good, and that's their background, right? They came from being search stars. Their respawns, Simp had a 1.74 hardpoint KD. 1.74. Like, what? So if we're just talking about respawns, I mean, the whole way around, they deserve to be the number one team until somebody shows that they can beat them 3 maps in a row, like how New York did. That was the most mind-boggling thing of the weekend for me, is what New York did to them in that domination.
That was mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. They're so good. They're so talented. I think they're the clear favorite to win every tournament that they're in, and we'll have to see if somebody can top them. It looks like a tall task, but
here's the thing about Atlanta. They will not be. Where's the standings? Where is it? Oh, it's behind this. I gotta move him out of the way. They will not be number one going to Atlanta. Period. It's not possible. They're probably gonna be 7, 8, 9. It just depends on how the bracket works out. But they will not be number one going into Atlanta. These standings are going to be weird throughout the season because everybody's not at every event. In London, the teams that are in London are going to move above Faze. So Chicago's probably going to be above Faze at the end of the London event. Dallas can even go all the way from where they are, which is 11th, and be above Faze. All they have to do is win 3 matches. So if Dallas makes it to the final bracket, and if they get first, I think you get an extra 10, so you could get 50. So there's going to be teams with 50 points, and FaZe is going to have 20 going into Atlanta. I feel like, to me, they did the right thing by embarrassing the teams they played. If they would have 3-0 and 3-0'd, teams would have had legitimate fear, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it, going into Atlanta, but they're beatable. That's what New York showed everyone. And I know it seems like that doesn't matter, but they can lose when they're playing at their absolute best. Now, Abizi was not playing his best. He said something about his controller wasn't turning as fast as it normally does. Celium's amazing. So here's the thing, Vital Monroe. You have to name every player on this team to give people credit. Because Major Maniac, I believe, had the highest search and destroy KD of the weekend with like a 17 or something. So, like
14, insanity.
14. You have to show love to every single player, to Priesta, you have to show love to Crowder, the coach. Like, you have to show love to the entire organization when a team is playing this well, where each individual player is playing their position as well as it can be played. And that's what we see from FaZe. And even when Abizi falls short, they go 6-1 and just embarrass teams, except they lost in Dom. And what that proved is they can lose in Dom. And so you take that map off of them, you win another, you got to beat them in one of the hard points, though. In one of the searches. And that's just going to be, how do you beat this team in search? Yeah, how do you beat this team in search? Like, so in Atlanta, they're going to probably win. And then, but if the Huntsmen win London, the Huntsmen are going to have 70. And if Atlanta wins Atlanta, they're going to have 70. So it'll still be first and second. So the Huntsmen, if they win London, can basically be like, we're in first place. Period.
Well,
and it's going to be, go ahead. It's interesting how the standings are going to work out.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. To me, it's just like, I don't put too much into like these standings, because it's just like Major League Baseball or the NBA, where teams always have, more games played than everybody else. So like mid-season standings, like if you look at the mid-season standings for the NBA right now, like you don't really put a lot into it, just because some teams have played more, some teams have played less, some teams play easier schedules, some teams have played harder, but in the end, it'll all work itself out. So like for now, I don't know how much I put into it. I think everybody's going to have their own personal viewpoints and power rankings and stuff like that. And then once the playoffs come, or whatever they're calling it, that's when it'll really shake out in the end.
Well, there's going to be a mid-season tournament that's going to be seeded by the standings, and then thanks for the follow, Wrexham. And then at the end of this, we're going to have champs, of course, which is going to be seeded by this list. And I believe like the bottom 4 have to do a playoff to see who the 2 of them that get in or something.
Nice.
So now that it's 3:57, you guys in about 3 or 4 minutes, you'll hear my youngest kids come in and scream if we're still streaming. But I'm going to let, I know it's crazy, but I'm going to let Icon give us his power rankings. And I'll tell you guys after he's done how hard it was like for me to try to do power rankings. But Icon's going to give us his current power rankings based on the event we just saw, and maybe some reasoning. And then we'll kind of end the stream there.
All right. So power rankings, what you've all been waiting for. At the bottom, I do have New York. I don't think that they'll stay there, just because they showed the potential that they have in that one map against Atlanta. But if I had to say right now, I would put New York at the bottom. In 11th, I would put Toronto. So the only reason why, even though they were pretty dominant in their search and destroys over the weekend, not being able to really win a respawn, I think has them at the bottom for me. And you might say, well, there's so many teams there that were 0-2 over the weekend, but I don't see the slaying power from Toronto. They were largely carried by methods. So I think those two things kind of mixed together there has Toronto at 11. Above that, I have OGLA. I don't know. They didn't really show much to me, and it sounds kind of weird because before this weekend started, I had them in that middle of the pack range, but they just didn't play well. Kenny and Dashy had a decent weekend, but TJ had like a 0.7. JCap had like a 0.7. They just weren't really all that dominant. So I put OGLA at 10. At 9, sorry to break your heart, Kingdom, but I have Seattle there at 9. Slackton and Abel were they just really didn't show up like they needed them to. Octane was phenomenal, and Carmina and Apathy played, I don't know, kind of just the usual that you would expect from them. But in order for them to perform better, they need Slackton and Abel to show up. Above that, I have the Royal Ravens, just because Scraps and Wuskin showed how good they could be, and then they showed kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, the second match, they were just like the exact opposite. So that's why I have them middle of the pack. I guess you could probably maybe put them under Seattle, but London showed their potential, so that's why I have them where they're at. Also, for them to play better, Jerd needs to play better. Jerd can't do the same thing that he did over the last weekend.
Right.
Above that, I have LAG, so Los Angeles Gorillas. Aqua was the bright spot for them, but the thing with LAG is that they're really good at search and destroy. They were technically 2-1 over the weekend, but that one was a forfeit, like we've mentioned a couple times. So they were really good at search. If Aches is able to double what he put out before, right? He was right around like 0.5 the whole time. So if Aches is able to double his production, then I think LAG could easily be top 5, top 6, but we'll put him there for now.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at 6th, I have Florida. Skies and Mox were phenomenal. Pristini and Search and Destroy is so much fun to watch. So I put them there. And then getting into the top 5, I have Paris. Again, nobody expected Paris to do what Paris did, but Kismet, Shocks, Dens were all really good. Luca needs to play better. Luca had a really subpar weekend, but Paris there. At number 4, and you're probably wondering why I haven't said Dallas yet, but I'm not even there yet. At number 4, I have Minnesota. GodRx and Assault are phenomenal. ASIM had a poor weekend, but online, ASIM has been absolutely frying. So I do expect ASIM to turn it around, but they're so good at respawn, but they weren't very good at search. So at number 4, I have Minnesota. I really do think I can't see them being beneath number 4, though. At 3, I have Dallas, and you might say, well, they got absolutely spanked this weekend, but everybody would agree that they played the 2 best teams. So if this was the traditional style where you're playing, you're dropping into losers bracket and going on a run, I think they probably would have ended up somewhere near that grand finals. Right. Maybe they wouldn't have made it, but they would have been there. So Crimsex played really well, but Illy and Shotzi, they need to step it up. It is what it is. And then at number 2, I have Chicago, just because you can't really put anybody above Atlanta. So Formal, RCD, Scump, Gunless all played really well. Envoy, if he gets in that 1.2 range, especially on respawns, I can see that being an absolute bloodbath whenever they meet Atlanta. And then obviously we've talked about it so much, but Atlanta at 1. Simp and Celium were phenomenal. If Abizi figures it out and he plays the way that Abizi normally plays, that's going to be like 90s Bulls. I mean, they'll just be so good. So that's it. All right. That's what I got.
That's the list, guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. I would say the only thing I would change is I would switch Seattle and London, and I switched Dallas and Minnesota. But that's so hard for me. Like, outside of I haven't seen enough. I haven't seen enough playing. I've seen enough playing to see who's the top 2 teams easy, who should be the top 4, yeah. And I've seen enough to say who looks like they're going to be at the bottom. But again, New York could come out and place top 2 or top 3 at London, and then they would be a different. It really, we didn't see enough. But I like your list. I actually, as you were going through it, I was kind of writing it down, and I like your list a lot. Thank you, all of you guys. There's a couple of you I didn't get to call out: Real Rob, Rexums, and Not Quite a Lung Doc. Thank you guys for following the stream. We got 1 million follows today. Couple of subscribers. Thank you guys that subscribed. Thank you guys for hanging out for the last 2 hours. And tweet at me if you. Yeah, we should get 3 events before power rankings. Tweet at me if you guys want to see this more often. As often as Icon is available, we'll try to do something. I think he was talking about once a month or something like that. So just
Definitely after the major events, doing
after the
something like
events,
this.
yeah, we'll do
for
a
sure.
post-event recap together, and we'll get him on screen next time. But I appreciate you guys for hanging out. This is your boy Kingdom. I'm gonna run a short ad. You guys can hang out and talk to each other in the chat if you want. But then I'm gonna be out of here. Peace out, guys.